September 2020. Can I welcome all members and officers to this meeting of Council, which, due to government advice to practice social distancing, this meeting will be held virtually. The meeting is being recorded and will be available via the Council's website to be viewed following the meeting. Everyone participating in the meeting will be accessing this meeting from remote locations. Please could everybody ensure their mobile phones are switched off or to silent mode. Members will have received an electronic copy of the agenda. I will ask officers to present a summary of the key points. For the record, the agenda can be viewed on the Council's website. Members and officers will be speaking at various points during the meeting, and those speaking may switch their cameras on at that point, but I would ask that, with the exception of myself as Mayor, at all other times you keep your cameras and microphones switched off, as this will help to minimise any background noise and interference and to ensure the connection remains as stable as possible. I will turn my microphone off during reports being presented by officers because I've got two yappy dogs and they will bark, and I don't want to disturb the meeting that way. If any members or officers wish to raise a point or question, they should use the instant messenger icon in the bottom left of the Skype window and simply type speak, and I will come to you in the order I receive requests. Please do not use your microphone until I invite you to do so. In the event that the Council requires to vote on any item of business before it at the meeting, I will announce that the members of Council have 20 seconds to vote by typing for, against or abstain in the instant messenger icon. I will then ask Democratic Services to announce the decision made by the committee or by Council. In the event that the recorded vote is requested at Council, I will ask the members to switch on their microphones, and the Democratic Services Officer will conduct a roll call of each member, asking whether they are for, against or abstain from the recommendation in the report before announcing the outcome of the decision. Officers from Democratic Services and ICT will be supporting the meeting and will be monitoring the use of microphones throughout the meeting, and where necessary will mute those not being used. Before we formally commence, I will ask the officers from Democratic Services to announce the names of the councillors not in attendance at this meeting. I would also ask the officers to introduce themselves as and when I invite them to speak during the course of the meeting. They should ensure microphones and cameras are switched off when not in use. Okay, we will now, sorry, my computer is really slow at this moment. We will now go to agenda item 1, and that is apologies for absence. I have already had recorded Councillor Mike Kern. Can I please have people indicate through instant messenger, and I will come to them individually. Okay, so Ross, I'll come to Ross first of all, please. Councillor Ross Penhale-Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Obviously, I put that in the instant messaging box. If Andrew is able to send the link to Councillor Edwards, that's great, and if it works, but in the event that he's not able to join, passing on his apologies. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Tim Thomas, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Apologies from Councillor James Radcliffe, childcare problems.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Okay, I did note earlier Councillor Mike Clark has registered an absence for Councillor Nora Clark. And can I just ask, I know some people, without me going all the way back through the instant messenger, for those that have indicated that they want to be leaving early from Council, can you please let me know now through instant messenger if you would like to speak?
Mr. Mayor, would you like me to list the members who are not in attendance this afternoon?
Yes, please, Andrew. Andrew, just before you start that, can I just record Councillor Venables has said that she will need to leave early. David White No, it wasn't David White. David Lewis. Did you also say, yeah, Councillor David Lewis has said that he needs to leave at 4:45 as well. And anybody else? While we're
Mr. Mayor, I'm in now, thank you.
Oh, thank you, Gary. Anybody else before I move on? No. Oh,
Sorry.
Councillor Tim Thomas, please. Is this to record
No.
an apology or?
No, only to say I've got to leave quite urgently at 5:15, but I'd rather hope we'd be finished by then. But
I would hope
yeah.
so.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Andrew, then if you can list those that are not present then, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. For the benefit of the recording, my name is Andrew Rees, Democratic Services Manager, and the members not present today are Councillor Sean Aspey, Councillor Paul Davis, Councillor Keith Edwards at present, although he's hoping to join, Councillor Brian Jones, Councillor Martin Jones, Councillor Sedgbeer, Councillor Stephen Smith, Councillor David White. That's the list that I have, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, then we will move on to agenda item number 2, declarations of interest. To receive declarations of personal prejudicial interest from members or officers in accordance with the provisions of the Members' Code of Conduct adopted by Council on the 1st of September 2008. Again, if I can ask you to indicate that you would wish to speak in the instant messenger. Councillor Paul Davis, Andrew was just saying that he is in attendance. Have you seen that message? And Councillor David White is also here.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I've just seen them. Thank you.
Okay, so we have no declarations of interest in relation to today's meeting.
I have sent one, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Pam Davis. And no others. Of course, if anything arises throughout the meeting, then just indicate within the instant messenger and we can make sure that the appropriate declarations are recorded. Okay, we will move on to agenda item number 3, to receive for approval the minutes of the meeting of Council held on the 22nd of July 2020. Can I have a mover, please?
Move.
And a seconder?
Second.
Second.
All in favour?
Yay.
Yeah.
Aye.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Okay, agenda item 4 then. I hope that you and your families are still all keeping safe and well. I would like to take the opportunity to again thank all staff across the authority for their continued hard work in these difficult times. Your ongoing efforts are very much appreciated. I would like to offer our congratulations to a local Bridgend County man, Lawrence Brophy of Pencoed. Lawrence has recently cycled from Land's End to John O'Groats to raise money and awareness for the homelessness charity Llamau. What makes Lawrence's journey even more remarkable, however, is that at 88 he is set to become the oldest man to complete this challenge. To date, he has raised over £3,000 for the charity, so well done, Lawrence, and I'm sure all members would join me in congratulating him. Again, I have some sad news to impart. Many of you may remember or have known George Davis, who unfortunately recently passed away. George acted as the mayoral consort to his daughter Marlene Thomas during her year as civic head and was also a former community councillor. Anyone who remembers George will have known what a larger than life and energetic person he was. Despite celebrating his 90th birthday while consort, he never missed an event and threw himself into whatever the role required. The long days never fazed him, and he would often go on to further community work after finishing his civic duties. So on behalf of the council, therefore, I would like to extend our condolences to Marlene and her family. Thank you very much. That is all from my announcements this month. Davis, there we are, that's done. Sorry, I've also received an email that I just need to check before I can progress on to the next item. Right, okay. There we are. No problem, that's fine. So we will go on to agenda item number 5 now, and that is to receive the announcements of the leader, Councillor Hugh David. Leader, would you like to come in, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members may have seen the latest news that it has been announced this afternoon that one of our neighbouring authorities, Rhondda Cynon Taf, has been placed in lockdown. So I'd like to provide you with an update of our own role as part of the regional response to the pandemic. At yesterday's meeting of Cabinet, we endorsed the Regional Action Plan, which outlines a raft of measures for tackling the spread of COVID-19 and responding to any incidents or outbreaks of the virus. The COVID-19 Prevention and Response Plan covers the entire Cwm Taf Morgannwg University Health Board area and has been coordinated between local authorities and the Health Board. It describes in detail the roles, key objectives and measures for the region. It sets out arrangements for preventing the spread of infection amongst the most vulnerable, mitigating and controlling its impact, and monitoring it within local communities. The plan also outlines the procedures in place when decisions on implementing local actions or restrictions are required, which we've seen most recently in Caerphilly County Borough and today in RCT. Many clusters and incidents can be managed through the Test, Trace, Protect programme without any need to close premises or initiate wider lockdown restrictions. Robust investigation, management and control arrangements are in place for any significant developments, and obviously I will keep members informed. As you know, local councils have a crucial role alongside our local partners and Welsh Government in responding to COVID-19. Demonstrated in how we continue to provide social care and support the vulnerable residents. The childcare hubs, which supported essential key workers and vulnerable children. The extra help for businesses, the deployment of our staff to set up and deliver the Test, Trace, Protect programme, and more. In the event that we need to respond to further significant incidents or outbreaks, we will continue to fulfil this role. I know that people will be concerned at the recent rise in infection rates across the South Wales region and the lockdown that has already been declared right on our doorstep. But I also want to reassure members and residents that we will do all we can to try and prevent this from happening here in Bridgend County Borough. At the same time, we need to recognise that whether we reach local or national lockdown or not largely depends on how our communities act and behave in the coming weeks. This is why it is more important than ever for us all to continue to respond together as one community, to behave in a responsible and safe manner, and to follow national requirements on social distancing, wearing face coverings, washing hands, using sanitizer, and so on. The vast majority of our residents across our communities have done all we have asked of them. Thousands have volunteered or helped their vulnerable neighbours during lockdown. Our key workers have gone above and beyond, and at times have risked their own health. But the pandemic is far from over. Worse could be to come. We must not let our guard down. We must raise our guard. It is now clear that there is community transmission on communities on our doorstep. Like the recent example of our message to people, together with South Wales Police, we've issued a joint statement urging people not to turn up and gather in large numbers for the cancelled Elvis Festival in Porthcawl, and to think twice. Stay safe and stay at home. I know that all members will support these efforts, help to promote these important key messages among our constituents in the crucial days and weeks ahead. Since school started back, we have seen a total of 9 incidents where staff or pupils have returned positive tests for coronavirus. As a result, many other pupils and staff are self-isolating as a precautionary measure. As the Education Minister pointed out recently, Such incidents were of course inevitable whilst the pandemic is ongoing, but with all reasonable safety measures in place, the advantages of attending school far outweigh the disadvantages. Schools have been preparing for pupils to return for some time now, and they've been able to take swift action together with Public Health Wales and the local authority in each case to act promptly using the advice and guidance in place. All of our local schools have a full range of measures in place to reduce risk, limit contact, and maintain high standards of hygiene. While unaffected pupils are continuing to attend lessons as normal, those who are self-isolating are receiving lessons thanks to online access, virtual classrooms, and blended learning facilities. We need parents, carers and guardians to support these efforts to fight the spread of the coronavirus by remaining vigilant, by not sending children to school if they exhibit any symptoms. The sudden rise in cases across the UK, current news headlines are also led by reports about how UK government and Welsh government are dealing with delays in coronavirus testing across the UK. Plans are in place locally to respond rapidly. For example, mobile test units have been deployed by Cwmtaf Morgannwg University Health Board in RCT and Merthyr in the hardest hit areas. I'm sure that, like me, members will be keeping a close eye on how these measures develop in coming days and weeks. The COVID-19 prevention and response plan is available to view at the Council website by members and of course any member of the public. And I would encourage members to read it for greater insight into how we are combating the pandemic on a regional scale. In the meantime, Bridgend County Borough Council will continue to work alongside partners to do all that we can to protect vulnerable residents and to ensure that we can continue to provide vital services for local people. Finally, Mr. Mayor, can I also extend my condolences to Marlene and George, both good friends of mine. He really was a character and a stalwart of the Garw Valley, and he will be missed by many, many people right across Bridgend County Borough and indeed across Wales. He made many good friends for the County Borough when he was the Mayor's consort. Can I also congratulate Mr. Brophy. Mr. Brophy was my teacher in Kevin Kruber Primary School, so I'm particularly pleased to hear about his achievement. And finally, can I extend a very warm welcome to Janine. It's lovely to see you here today. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Leader. And that was an example of my microphone being off because my dogs have been barking, so you wouldn't have wanted that. Andrew, just so that you can actually see, Councillor Nora Clark has said that she's now in, and also Councillor Martin Jones has been able to log in, so both are now in attendance.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's noted.
Thank you very much. We will move on then to agenda item number 6, and that is a report of the Chief Executive and a presentation on the Cardiff Capital Region City Deal and the programme of the future presentations to Council. So could I ask Mark Shepherd first, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just say a few words of introduction to introduce the report, if I may. As you say, the purpose of the report is to introduce a presentation to Council today on the Cardiff Capital Region City Deal programme, but also to inform members of a programme of future presentations to Council as well. So firstly today, I'm delighted to welcome Kelly Byrne, the Director of the Cardiff Capital Region City Deal, and Frank Holmes, the Chair of the Cardiff Capital Region Regional Economic Growth Partnership, to deliver the presentation, and we're very grateful for them coming along. I think if I just draw attention quickly to paragraph 3.2, which sets out some of the background to the City Deal Deal and some of the metrics around it. But I think probably what I wanted to say is I think there are probably for me three main reasons for the presentation today. Firstly, I think it's incredibly helpful so we all have a better understanding of City Deal. I think unfortunately there sometimes are some misconceptions because it is different. It's a long-term strategic regional investment fund, and we're not really used to dealing with things on that sort of basis ordinarily within local government. Secondly, I think it's an opportunity to demonstrate good progress across the region and for members to understand the activity that's been going on. And thirdly, I think specifically it's an opportunity to talk about Bridgend and the opportunities within Bridgend. And of course, that's particularly important at a time post-COVID where we've identified economic recovery in particular as one of our main priorities. So in a minute, I'll hand over to Kelly and Frank, but just briefly to mention in paragraph 3.3, we also have, a programme of other presentations, which I just want to draw your attention to and to note. In October, we intend having Valleys to Coast coming along for a similar presentation. In November, the Police and Crime Commissioner and the Chief Constable of South Wales Police. And then in December, Cwm Taf Morgannwg University Health Board. But without further ado, Mr. Mayor, if it's okay with you, we can hand over to Kelly and to Frank.
Yes, of course, Mark. And obviously I'll invite Kelly to turn on her camera and her microphone now and begin your presentation. It is a visual presentation. Who's going to be putting that up for us? Do you have it, Andrew?
Yes, I do, Mr. Mayor. I will share my screen. Okay. So if members can bear with me while I put Kelly's presentation up and share my screen with yourselves.
And while you're doing that, Andrew, you can see in the instant messenger, Councillor Pam Davies has declared a personal declaration of interest because she knows Frank Holmes. So she's recording that now, okay?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I think the presentation should be visible.
Yes, it is visible.
Yeah. Okay, I'll hand over to Kelly Byrne.
Thank you. And just before, sorry, Kelly, just before you do,
that's okay.
Councillors, could I please ask you that you register any interest in asking questions, and rather than interrupting through the presentation, we will take the questions at the end of the presentation, please. Over to you, Kelly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Mr. Mayor, thank you, Leader and Chief Executive, for inviting us along this afternoon. So I'm Kelly Byrne and I'm Director of the Cardiff Capital Region. I'm here this afternoon to have a discussion about progress with the Cardiff Capital Region, our ambitions, what next, and how we're building out regional scale economic development, which is so critical at this time, especially given the continued pandemic and clearly the repercussions that is having upon our economy. Frank, I know you're with us. Do you want to just say a few words of introduction?
Thank you, Kelly. Yes, my name is Frank Holmes and it's a pleasure to be here. Good afternoon, everybody. It's very kind of you to give up your time for us to update you on where we are with this program, which, as Mark has said, is a 20-year program, and where our ambitions are, which we will explain later on. But I think it's important to get a good understanding of how we've got to where we are, and hopefully we'll be able to tell you where we're heading, and in particular, as requested, where some of these opportunities are going to impact on Bridgend.
Okay, thank you, Frank. So this afternoon, really, we want to talk about the Cardiff Capital Region as a driver, not just for growth in isolation, but for benefit for the entire region. And I think going back to the announcement the leader just made about Rhondda and Taff being placed in a local lockdown as a result of the COVID pandemic, we knew before we went into COVID that the Cardiff Capital Region was really unequal in terms of economic prosperity, in terms of some of those social outcomes. And I think one of the things that we now have to do in terms of thinking about the COVID recovery is ensuring that that is sustainable, that it impacts all parts of the region, because we can't let COVID-19 exacerbate some of those inequalities. So Andrew, if you can just turn to the first slide, please, so I can just give a quick overview of what we'll be covering this afternoon. That's great. So we just want to take some time out very briefly just to reiterate the purpose of the Cardiff Capital Region and indeed the City Deal. Some of the big challenges, because as I've said already, not everything is plain sailing, but how equally we think we can convert those into some significant opportunities. I wanted to give Council as well some assurance about the types of conditions that we're creating in the Cardiff Capital Region. This is certainly not a business as usual intervention or programme of activity, and I think some of that is backed up by the things that we've done around governance and partnership, the progress that we're now making with our wider investment fund and some of the principles that guide deployment of that investment fund, the kinds of projects that we're delivering and some of those ambitions for the future, what that really means in terms of how the Cardiff Capital Region is seen and some of those perceptions, not just locally but globally as well. Tie it in clearly to relevance for Bridgend, why it's really important that we continue to act as a region, still thinking locally, but acting on a regional scale. And then we'll draw it together with some conclusions, which will hopefully lead to a good discussion and questions and answers thereafter. So if we can have the next slide, please, Andrew, that's great. Okay, so I'm sure you all have the headline stuff on the Cardiff Capital Region, what we're about, and the Cardiff Capital Region City Deal in particular. But to refresh, it's a triumvirate partnership. It straddles three layers of government, so UK government, Wales government, and the 10 local authorities in the capital region area. So a population size of about 1.6 million, so it's quite significant, represents nearly 53% of all Welsh economic output. So it's a significant region in terms of the economic geography that we represent. The City Deal is nearly a £1.3 billion city deal to help us achieve some of those economic goals. 734 million of that goes into delivering the South East Wales Metro project, and the remainder sits within our wider investment fund. Now, we have three targets to guide deployment of that wider investment fund that have been bestowed upon us by UK and Wales government. We've got to try and create 25,000 additional jobs, leverage 4 billion in private investment, and uplift GVA growth productivity in the region by about 5%. But I think the clear political contention underpinning this, because targets are great, aren't they, but sometimes they can lead to perverse outcomes, is that we could hit all of those targets and fundamentally miss the point. It would be easy to create 25,000 jobs in call centres and the like, but they're not the things that are really going to move the dial in the region. If unemployment rose, those of us in work would look much more productive. So productivity would increase. So we've got to be really careful in terms of how we're interpreting targets. And I think, again, to give you some assurance, we've taken quite a lot of time out to think about what is this thing called economic growth? You know, why are we doing it? It's not the end in itself, it's the means. And I think politically, that's very much about making things better. It's about social impact. It's about, you know, justness. It's about equality and making sure that the whole of the region can benefit from what we're trying to do. We've seen time and time again the world over that growth strategies can sometimes just exacerbate inequality. And I think that's really important in the Cardiff Capital Region, because we've got some of the areas of highest growth and the most competitiveness, and yet they exist cheek by jowl with some of the least competitive areas in the whole of the UK. And if you're acquainted with the UK Competitiveness Index members, you'll know that we've got 3 local authority areas which sit in the bottom 10 of nearly 379 local authority areas in the whole of the UK. And Blaen y Gwent, still after 20 years, sits at the very, very bottom of that index. So it can't be about trickle-down economics and just building up our cities and hoping the rest of the hinterland feels the benefits over the time. It's truly got to be a city deal and a Cardiff Capital Region in which all areas are valued. So yes, you know, there's some obvious things, innovation, infrastructure, but it has to be about local economies, foundational economies, and growing productivity in the public sector as well. So we can have the next slide, please, Andrew. So just as a bit of background, really, because we all accept that it's a very volatile environment at the moment, even before COVID, EU exit, some of the fiscal and policy uncertainty that brings, as I say now, exacerbated by economic downturn. We've seen 2 successive quarters of economic decline, so the UK is officially in recession. And that means we've got to think really, really differently about our place within this. And we've got to see the Cardiff Capital Region as a catalyst for a very different approach. There'll be no more city deals in the future. UK government have made that quite clear. And we're going to have to compete for regional investment in the future. And we think whether that's through Shared Prosperity Fund or through the massive resources that UK government has, through private sector money, the Cardiff Capital Region now is up against the likes of the Manchester City Region, up against the Edinburgh City Region, and so on. So we've got to show that we can be competitive in that new environment and win those resources on a competitive basis. So I think for us that means fundamentally rethinking a lot of things. You know, this isn't just about short-term, quick interventions. We've got to test ourselves on doing the right things. I think in terms of local and local authority, political leadership, this is more important than ever. I think in the past, you know, it's been about the public sector enabling and de-risking projects, and I think there's a much more progressive role to play for the local public sector around framing the big industrial and economic challenges of the day. And I think, you know, one of the things that we've done in the past, we seem to be really good at making an argument for a bigger slice of the pie. We want more of this fund or more of that fund. We've got to start talking about a fundamentally bigger pie and thinking much more carefully and progressively about how we mobilise all of the resources that are available to us in the Cardiff Capital Region. So, you know, one example, UK Research and Innovation, so bodies such as Innovate UK, the annual budget is £6.4 billion. So yeah, you know, a £500 million wider investment fund is important, but really it's just got to be a lever into those bigger sums of money, which we've got to progressively bring into the capital region. So if I can have the next one, please, Andrew. And I know, Frank, you're going to want to talk to some of this in terms of the process that we've put in place.
Thank you, Kelly. Just by way of background, when I was approached to get involved with this program, I was fortunate enough to get the leaders who interviewed me to allow us to put together a board of individuals who I believe bring a huge amount of skill and experience to what we're trying to achieve here. And I guess our role was very much about being assessors of the investment program, being advisors to the Joint Cabinet, and at the same time being advocates for the region by bringing in with investment and being good diplomats in terms of its outward reach. When we arrived, there were something in the region of £800 million of projects that had accumulated over the years. But as business leaders, we took the view that we really needed a plan and to make sure that where the money was invested actually accorded with the plan. So we decided to embark on 3 pillars that underpin our plan. And by the way, the wider investment fund, as Kelly has mentioned, is the 495 million. It is a lot of money in any context, but over 20 years, if you do the maths, it's 25 million per annum. And therefore, to really make an impact on the region, we have to be able to leverage the 4 billion, which is within our targets. I guess the important thing to realize is that unless we could really get true connectivity within the region, and I mean by that, not only on policy, but also in genuine bona fide partnerships between the private, the public sector, HE, further education, and social enterprise, it was going to be very difficult to become investable. So that remains a key pillar of our plan. In order to become competitive, which is the second pillar, we have to invest in innovation, improving productivity, making sure we have the right skills for the jobs of tomorrow, but also at the same time being connected, not just in transport. And COVID has really shown us, and the fact that we are meeting like this today, that our digital infrastructure is absolutely paramount, not just on a local level, but on a global level. And thereafter, we also need to become resilient. And that means really understanding how we can recycle these funds. We want these funds to go further and further so that the next generation may also benefit from this one-off city deal. It's just not just about regeneration, but it is about resilience, being able to deal with those challenges which are coming our way and which we are facing at the moment. And this plan has, I'm delighted to say, been reviewed very recently in the light of the COVID pandemic and will continue to be reviewed thereafter. Alongside the plan, we then developed the investment framework, which basically was to categorize our areas of priority, primarily being infrastructure, innovation, and challenge. And these funds are there to sort of leverage innovation, but at the same time to enable companies to grow through innovation and investment, and also throwing out challenges for the economic and industrial challenges that we see ahead, such as aging population, artificial intelligence, clean growth, and the future of mobility. And these two sort of priorities have been fused together, and we are progressing substantial numbers of investment opportunities through our investment panel, which again is constituted not only by 5 lay business people, but by 5 chief executives of the local authorities within the region. So that's where we're going. But in order to really make a good and grasp of where our priorities lay, we also undertook significant research, which are highlighted in the slide, in those areas where we needed to be sure that our decisions were well placed and that we were putting our money to good use across the entire region. It's absolutely fundamental that the entire region benefits from this program. And actually, we don't see it just as a 20-year program. We see it as the beginning of a longer-term Cardiff Capital Region, maybe developing into something more substantial in the years to come. I'd like to also say that I'm being very fortunate in the support that I've had from the individuals who have given up huge amount of time to do this work, unpaid, but very dedicated, and without them we wouldn't have got this far in the time that we have. By way of personal background, my firm, which I've founded over 28 years ago, has done a lot of work in the region. I specialize in corporate finance, I specialize in mergers and acquisitions, and probably closer to where you are. I did 9 acquisitions for Biotrace International, which was a leading Bridgend company. We're also blessed to have Simon Perrott, who heads up Bridgend College, on our board, so he is a very good representative for your local authority, but also he's an outstanding individual in his own field. And unusually, we tended to rotate the further education and university participants on an annual basis, but such is the caliber of Simon that I have to say, I asked him if he would do a second term, and thankfully he did agree. So that's a little bit of background from you. I lived near Iweni for 30 years, so I know the area well. I have very good friends in Bridgend. I have a serious fondness for the area, and we're here to try and do the best we can by you.
Andrew, can you just take us back one slide, please? Just so I can just reinforce some of those points that Frank has made really well, because I hear all the time, you know, oh, City Deal, you know, that's just supporting projects in Newport and Cardiff, and it's not. And I just want to take a few minutes out just to, again, give some assurances about the thought and the consideration that we've put into this process. We don't just accept any applications, and in fact, we don't accept applications for grants at all. As Frank was saying, the research that we've done and the evidence base that we've got tells us that in the Cardiff Capital Region, we've got to stop being all things to all people and saying we're good at everything, because we're not. There are some sectors that we stand to be really strong in, and we've got to be really focused about what those things are. So we know it's advanced compound semiconductors. We know we're really good at the defence aspects of cyber. Insurtech, fintech is really important. Medtech is important, and we've got a strong presence and a growing presence in the creative industries. So all of that evidence base informs decision making, and that red document you can see on the slide there is our investment framework. So for us, it's not just about what projects do we invest in, it's about where do we invest to make maximum impact across the region over time. So building out economic clusters, industrial scale clusters, not loads of one-off projects that may or may not work. It's thinking in a much more strategic way about what we need to do to move the dial for the long term for the Cardiff Capital Region. So we've got an innovation investment priority, an infrastructure priority, and a challenge priority, because frankly, we're not even asking good enough questions at the moment, let alone getting the right answers. So we need to be much more experimental and try and shine the light on some of the things that we don't know. As Frank was saying, what is different about our city deal is we've decided that because of the dependency culture that we've sometimes had, moving from one programme to the next, giving out grants, we've got to try and make this an investment programme proper. So the idea is that this is an evergreen fund that will always recycle and return its investment. Of course, as part of a portfolio approach, you know, not every project or programme is going to be capable of return on investment, but we're not here to spend down a fund and then to put the bowl out and ask where the next one is. This is about setting the capital region up to be sustainable for the long term. And I think what we've been doing is we've been putting in place the foundation so all this can work. And now we've gone through that startup phase as any business would, and we're very much into scale up opportunity. So Andrew, if I can have the next one now, please, that would be great. So again, in terms of those foundations, you know, our governance frameworks are endorsed by 3 levels of government. And that's hard sometimes, if I'm honest, to work in that multi-governance, multi-layer environment. But it means that our governance comes under close scrutiny, it's peer-reviewed, it's subject to legal tests all of the time. I think the Cabinet has gone from strength to strength. I think it's really mature. And I think the difference, again, with the city deal is because we've got a wide open investment fund that takes competitive applications, regional cabinet have to come together to make those decisions which are in the interests of the region. There's no predetermined projects or pet projects. They are genuinely about the projects that can make the best difference in the capital region. And again, in terms of representation, the chair for the first couple of years of the city deal was Councillor Andrew Morgan. At the AGM this year, that moved on to Councillor Anthony Hunt. There are 2 vice chairs, Councillor Peter Fox and Councillor Hugh Thomas. Your own leader, Councillor Hugh David, heads up the Regional Transport Authority and is the cabinet lead for infrastructure and is having a massive impact in terms of UK level government conversations at this time about things like levelling up and why our infrastructure needs in this region have to be met if we're going to make a contribution to UK PLC. So regional cabinet is mature. I think it's taken a very different approach. As Frank just said, a lot of the work goes on in the private sector with business expertise and leadership. There is an investment panel in place now that advises regional cabinet. So I'm making sure that at all times, regional cabinet as the decision makers are getting access to the best possible advice, impartial advice that they can possibly get. So as I say, you know, a strong mix of local and industrial leadership. And as Frank was just saying, that regional economic growth partnership has gone from strength to strength. They've done publications, thought leadership stuff. They're advising ministers right across the board. They've helped us with the plan. They've given us all the credentials for the investment framework. They turn up and make decisions on, to inform decisions on investment proposals. So all of this work that we're getting from these individuals, and Frank has mentioned Simon Perrott, is pro bono. And to be honest, if we had to go out to the market and pay for that expert advice and input, we couldn't afford it. So I think the city deal is already making an impact in terms of the resources and assets that it is bringing to the table. And beyond the city deal, there's some great work going on in terms of the region signing up to one strategic land use development plan, which is a significant move. The Valleys Regional Park, which Bridgend Council is hosting, and things like our skills frameworks for the region. So that maturity, I think, is a real show of strength. And Frank, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
No, I think it's a new experience for some of us in the business world, but I have to say that I've been hugely impressed by the collegiate atmosphere that is embedded in the cabinet. I've had the opportunity to join cabinet on away days to discuss strategy, and it is an absolute pleasure to work with individuals who are working hard to put something together which is unique for Wales. Admittedly, a programme that covers probably at least half of Wales's population and a big contributor to its GVA. So all of that is highly rewarding in its own context. The board that we have covers, by way of background, large business, small business, medium-sized business, skills, education, the third sector, into social enterprise. We have an incredible economist on our board in Kevin Gardner, who is head of strategy at Rothschilds. We have Chris Sutton, former chairman of the local CBI for South Wales, and all of these people have given some really good input at short notice, and it's been a pleasure to work with them. So I'm very pleased with the way things have developed. I would say that, wouldn't I? And I'm sure I'm not here to mark my own homework, but it is a pleasure to be involved in this programme. But we have some big aspirations, and those aspirations we'll come on to talk about and how they impact on Bridgend, because I think that's really what you want to hear.
Yeah, if I can have the next slide then, please, Andrew. So let's talk about the status of the pipeline and the investments we're making. So at the moment, you can see there's a large number of projects that have entered the investment framework with a total investment request of about 390 million. And don't forget, the emphasis here is on return on investment. So this isn't grants that we're talking about. If we took all of those projects forward to regional cabinet for approval, and I don't think for 1 minute all of those will go forward, as many of you will know, coming from a business background, for every 10 projects, only a handful are going to go forward. That's the kind of natural funnel rate. But if we did all of those projects, you can see that we max out in terms of investment leverage targets and in terms of jobs created. So to give you an idea on the next slide then about where we are, and again, our investment framework has been open for a year. So this is work that we've done very, very quickly in the very recent past. So in terms of public-led interventions, and the reason why I've described these as public-led interventions is we have applied into the investment framework for projects that are important to the whole of the Cardiff Capital Region. So we have to be treated just like any other potential applicant. And those projects, as you can see there, are the £50 million for Metro Plus, the £40 million for Metro Central, the graduate programme, the housing fund, which we're talking to all local authorities about at the moment, and the challenge fund for foundational economy growth post-COVID. So those projects are really important because every single local authority area in the region gets a bite of the cherry. So those projects are, they have regional scale and coverage. Everyone has a Metro Plus scheme. Every single area in the city region has been part of the graduate programme, is now applying to the housing fund, can take part in the challenge fund. And we've had 2 private sector-led interventions that have been approved by regional cabinet to date. The one you probably all know, which was the £40 million loan investment in the compound semiconductor foundry in Newport, and a recent one that we did with a med tech company. But as I say, we've got lots more proposals in the pipeline that we're ploughing through at the moment, and an immediate pipeline which is very, very significant. But we're not just focusing here on the City Deal pot and the private leverage that brings. We've also been much more muscular with UK government and working with the UK government really around bringing in additional investment. So a few weeks ago, we were notified by UK Research and Innovation that we made the 7 finalists in the whole of the UK for the Strength in Places Fund, bringing £44 million into the compound semiconductor cluster in the region. The same with DCMS on a 5G project. the local full fibre network project, which again will benefit all 10 local authorities in the region by unlocking some of those local networks for future connectivity. The investment from the Wales European Funding Office, which is going into our Challenge Fund. Councillor David has presided over the successes in terms of ultra low emission vehicles, bringing all of that money in to try and grow and invest in our programme. So we're never just spending something down, we're always building up that opportunity in the future. And I think, Frank, as we've noted there on the slide, you know, the majority of these programmes, not all of them, you know, they can't be, because sometimes investment in transport is not going to give you a return. It's about unlocking opportunities somewhere else. But the main principle is that we're not running down the fund, we are growing it. And I think in terms of the future, that's a really important message to take on. So in terms of potential future projects, then on the next slide, I talked about an immediate pipeline. We've got a business case that we're building at the moment for an SME scale-up fund. One of the big issues that we have in the Cardiff Capital Region is the absence of risk capital, particularly in terms of research and development. So we're working with the British Business Bank and their Patient Capital Fund at the moment to bring together a new fund for businesses in the region. And we want to try and target that again at the areas in which we have specialisms, not spread the jam so thin that you can't see the impact, but be much more focused in terms of the areas where we know we have those great strengths. A strategic premises fund, we all know the COVID impact has changed the way we think about offices, home and local working. But some of our big sectors that are growing in strength, like medtech, like some aspects of advanced manufacturing around future materials and processes, they need big premises, they need facilities, they need laboratory space, and they need clean room space. So that strategic premises fund, again, it's a commercial fund, so it returns its investment. That is going to be significant. We're working with Welsh and UK governments on landing a lithium-ion battery development opportunity in the Vale of Glamorgan. Again, it's hit the headlines, but could be significant in terms of the automotive industry in the region, particularly given the Ford news. There's numerous projects going on around medtech. One is a life sciences park, and some of the work that we want to do around that. Supply chain development opportunities linked to that. Fibre to the premise proposal for the Cardiff Capital Region again is in train, making sure that we have connectivity, fibre connectivity right across the region. That's been difficult because investors are attracted to the areas that are more commercially attractive, but we think with our backing and with some of our strategic investment, looking at innovative projects in rural areas as well, we can create that end-to-end connectivity, which would be massively significant for the region. So Future Industries Apprenticeship Programme is something that we're working on as well. Strength in Places, we're going to keep hitting UK government with these big value propositions around those sectors that I've mentioned that are strong, and future energy systems as well, and looking at the net zero agenda. Now, this is something that Bridgend has incredible strengths in, has led the way in terms of Innovate UK funding, and we've got a significant opportunity in the region, Frank, Project Catalyst, which is a hydrogen future mobility proposal, which is seeking 5 manufacturing plants. So we're working on that at this time in quite a dedicated way. So just before we go on to the next slide then, if we can have that one, Andrew, please, so I can just talk to that. Just wanted to give you confidence again, you know, that in terms of the work we're doing around policy, thought leadership stuff, trying to influence governments to think about our way of working and to see if this has relevance in other settings. We've got a partnership with the Global Welsh, building upon the Welsh diaspora, which exists worldwide. We've got a Global City Hubs project with Dublin and the US, which is around medtech, which is attracting a lot of local businesses, a partnership with Taiwanese University around SME growth. Frank and the REGP have launched an initiative called Manufacturing Wales. Frank, I don't know if you want to say a few words about that, because it is particularly resonant to Bridgend.
It is indeed, and it comes back to what I said earlier about constantly reviewing our industrial and economic plan, and that is realizing where the emphasis is going to be in terms of the industries of tomorrow. And I guess we have reviewed those sectors where we have demonstrable strength, and it is pleasing to say that by electing to sponsor compound semiconductors, the artificial intelligence and cyber, fintech, medtech, and to some extent, albeit in its infancy, the creative industries, that I think we've chosen particularly well those industries which will fare strongly regardless of the nightmare that we're all going through. As far as manufacturing Wales, this was born out of companies that I was aware of that had participated in the production of PPE. All of them had actually diverted their attention from what they were normally engaged in terms of their day-to-day manufacturing. And I decided with them that we would put together this network, Pan Wales, but a network that would focus on high quality, investing in innovation, best-in-class manufacturing capability, because the reality is that onshoring and having strong supply chains in the region and across Wales will be paramount to the future of this sector. And I can see that manufacturing will have its bounce back in the very near future. So this network is due to be launched next month, and I'm proud to be involved with the initiative, which I think will have a serious impact in the Bridgend area, where there is a substantial presence of the manufacturing sector, and we are talking to companies in your area of the local authority.
Thank you, Frank. And Andrew, if we can have the next slide, then I think that leads us nicely, Frank, into what all this means for Bridgend, because, we're never going to get away from this question. And I know the leader has said that this is about regional scale development, but we're never going to get away from the question of what this means for local areas. And I think it's quite right that that question is asked. And I think, again, we know Bridgend really, really well. We work closely with officers, with the chief executive. We are one partnership. City Deal isn't one way. It can't just deliver for an area. It has to deliver with an area. And we expect the council and the community to bring us deal flow and to bring us opportunities that we can deploy that investment fund on and around. So Bridgend still is an intensively manufacturing location. It still does really well on all of the indicators. Life sciences is incredibly strong in Bridgend. Bridgend College is part of all of our future skills work in connectivity terms. Bridgend train station is the second busiest in the Cardiff capital region. And we know the UK government has a very serious eye on Bridgend in terms of it being at the heart of the Future Energy Revolution programme. In terms of the UK Competitiveness Index, it's the seventh most competitive area in the whole of Wales. It ranks about 288 in the whole of the UK, so it has gone up, the UK Competitiveness Index, over time. Those programmes that I was talking about earlier, members, like Metro Plus, you have a scheme in Pyle, Metro Central and the Core Valley lines will clearly impact unlocking some of the connectivity issues that we have around rail in Bridgend. The Housing Viability Gap Fund, we're talking to your officers at this time about the Awenny Road site. There's another one at, I think it's Avon Park at Waterton that we're also talking about. So plenty of potential there. Within the Housing Fund, there's also an SME Finance Fund, which already we've had loads of local interest in and around, and the Challenge Fund as well, because Bridgend has got a very rich history in terms of leading on SBRI projects. So Mike, to date, leading on your district heating project, has been a great support on that. The graduate scheme, Bridgend is one of our strongest performers. You can see just some of the companies that we're working with there. There's a bigger list that sits behind that. I spoke to the team today. They're currently shortlisting with Zimmer Biomet for 4 process engineering jobs. They've had 80 applicants already just for those 4 graduate jobs. So you can see the kind of demand that we are cultivating. Bridgend will also get the local full fibre network upgrade to connectivity, and the digital proposal that Frank and I and others are working on at the moment for full fibre to the premise will impact the whole of Bridgend. And it's difficult because some of the rural areas, the northern parts of the Garrow Valley, parts of Maesteg, they're not always commercially attractive because they don't have dense populations. So we're doing some innovative work around rural solutions and rural technologies that could be deployed in those areas as well. So the next slide, please, Andrew. So in terms of other impacts then, the Clusters Fund that we spoke about, I've said Bridgend is strong at life sciences, really strong in terms of energy, aspects of advanced manufacturing. There are companies that should be queuing up to take part in these kinds of funds, to apply to our strategic premises fund as well. And indeed, those funds will be open to all businesses and organisations in the region. I mentioned transport and the important work that the leader is doing in terms of levelling up. You'll all be aware that UK government has a very visible agenda around making infrastructure, research and development, innovation, investment work for the whole of the UK. It certainly hasn't worked for the Cardiff Capital Region to date. So levelling up, influence in UK government, saying what levelling up means for the Cardiff Capital Region in transport terms in particular is a priority. And I've mentioned some of the key schemes there that we're putting forward, and the bus priority, which I know is especially significant to Bridgend. In terms of supply chains, loads of work going on at the moment. Renewron, Photronics, which is part of our compound semiconductor supply chain, particularly in relation to one of our companies, Newport Wafer Fab. And, just in terms of some of the companies, because Innovate UK are working very closely with us, and they're supporting, Author Clinical. They've just got a knowledge transfer partnership with Innovate UK. Renewron, 8 Innovate UK grants over the period. We're talking millions of pounds here. Knowledge transfer partnerships with companies like, Rockwool with Spectrum Technologies, BIC Innovation, Renishaw, DST Innovations. Just in terms of looking at the profile of companies that Innovate UK is working with in Bridgend at the moment, there is a long list, and there's some really innovative stuff going on around there. So I mentioned Spectrum as one example, Spectrum Technologies, looking at aerospace electric real-time manufacturing processes, quantum computing. Some of this stuff is really cutting edge and gives us an extraordinary platform to build upon. I mentioned FinTech earlier as well, members, and some of the work that we're doing around InsurTech, which is a massive opportunity for the capital region with companies like Admiral, our only FTSE 100 company, and Go Compare. And we've just recently awarded FinTech Wales £250,000 to do feasibility work on FinTech hubs, one of which includes Bridgend. So working very, very closely on that. We have worked with Welsh Government as well to get a seed fund together for Bridgend, which we're working with the Iron on at the moment. And okay, it's only 100k, but we've stepped up and we've recognised the massive impact on Bridgend, County Borough and the surrounding area as a result of the likely forward impact. And that seed fund is to enable you to grow those investment propositions that can come back to City Deal, that can go to UK government, that we can take to institutional investors, retail investors and others to mitigate some of that and to build upon some of those future industries that I've been speaking about. I want to mention very, very quickly the Heat Network, SBRI, that I've spoken about, but massive support through the UK industrial strategy for the Bridgend Council sort of led smart energy project, and some of the future potential around hydrogen. I mean, this could be absolutely massive. And I make no exaggeration when I say that nationally, strategically, Bridgend is seen as a key location for the future development of this work. And I hope that is something that we can work together to build upon. So we can just move on quickly, Andrew, because we're just at the end now. And again, a question that I'm asked all of the time: why should we support the Cardiff Capital Region? Why should we do it when local services are suffering as a result of different things such as austerity? Why do we need to be in this? And I just think, and you may challenge me and say, well, you would say that, don't you? It's your job. That the Cardiff Capital Region has emerged as the key attractor for economic South East Wales. the countries that we're talking to, the potential investors, they're impressed with our mindset. They're impressed with the fact that we've moved away from a grant culture, that we're trying different things. We're trying to run funds. We're working with the private sector to fill gaps in expertise that sometimes the public sector doesn't have. And I think that that is really important to bear in mind. Welsh Government has just commissioned a report through the OECD looking at regional economic governance. And a lot of what we're doing aligns with the recommendations that the OECD is actually putting forward to Welsh Government. And I hope today we've given you some confidence that, you know, we're not here just to chuck a bit of money around and, yeah, great, let's hope for some impact. We've taken this really seriously. We've put the right frameworks and the right processes in place. We're open to challenge and scrutiny and rigour. And I think some of the big issues of the day that we've spoken about already, levelling up, you know, the fact that UK government are putting £33 billion into research and development, we've got to be there, we've got to be at the table, we've got to show that we've got a voice and that we're good enough to take this investment and make something of it. There's talk now in the Comprehensive Spending Review about place-based funding settlements. So one of the things that Frank and I are doing at the moment is building what we've called a levelling up prospectus. And I know the leader is particularly keen for this to contain our set of asks and offers around transport and infrastructure. I'm very keen that our innovation asks are in there, our asks in relation to company growth, and the public sector are also set out within that. But we can't do any of this if we just operate very locally and in parochial ways, frankly. We've got to have a joined up voice and show that we've got that regional scale to deliver very, very local outcomes. And as I've said on that slide there, you know, competitiveness is not zero sum. It's not about your place or my place. If we're all in it together, then we have that opportunity to make that impact right across the board. So just in terms of some final conclusions from us before we open up to discussion and questions then, you know, I hope we've given you the assurance as we go into our first Gateway review, really, that we've got firm foundations here, we've got solid plans for the next stage of the journey, good political local leadership, which I think makes, you know, the whole world of difference, especially when you're trying to give investors confidence that our leaders are in this for the next 20 years. You know, that stability from an investment point of view is really so important. So we've taken time to build the right evidence, to get a good strategy, a proper investment framework that isn't just about projects, it's about place. We've got a good balance of local, political and business leadership, which I think is really important. And we've got already to date, we've got some big external investment in addition to the City deal, which shows that we can compete with other UK regions, which I think is significant. The evergreen focus of our investment fund is really important. Frank has already said that the wider investment fund is only 500 million. That's over 20 years, but we're looking to leverage that times 8. You know, that's the target that we've set ourselves in terms of that return on investment. And as I've said on the slides there, all of this is really important because this isn't just about a City deal. We're trying to build out here the pattern and the blueprint for a City region. And hopefully you will see that we've got dots of investment all across the City region map. This isn't a Cardiff and Newport agenda. This is about ensuring no place is left behind. And I think you can see just from the chart I've popped on there, you know, as with any startup business, the first couple of years we've laid the foundations, but we're already in that scale up phase and we are ready to sustain and spread that impact. So members, again, thank you very much for having us along this afternoon. I hope that's given you some confidence that we have the right plans in place. We very much welcome a discussion now, and Mr. Mayor, Frank and I are very happy to take any questions. So thank you very much for your time. It is appreciated.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Absolutely fantastic presentation. Nice to see Spectrum mentioned. They are a previous Business Award winner in Bridgend. And of course, it wouldn't be a council meeting if Kyra Minewater didn't get a mention. It's obvious that 2016 gave rise to two different aspects, but at least one of them is positive, and it's great to hear the amount of work that is actually going on around the city deal. I have had several people that have asked for questions, but before I do that, can I have a mover and a seconder for the report, please?
Move, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Second. Okay, my first question then, so we all in favour?
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
First question,
Yeah.
Councillor Matthew Voisey, please.
Can you see me? Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Frank and Kelly.
Yes.
It's very interesting. As a Cardiff born and bred person and living in Bridgend, I can see it from both ends of the region. And I do understand fully the idea of gearing up and welcome the many strands that you've put to it. I want to concentrate on infrastructure and the foolish decision by the First Minister not to proceed with the M4 relief road around Newport. When we came to council to approve our support for the regional deal, it was an unknown at the time, and clearly after spending over 125 million pounds on feasibility, the First Minister decided that it wasn't a sensible solution, which I run a business in South Wales, in Bridgend, and amongst the business community, I mean, it was used as an excuse for the Grenadier factory in Bridgend. It was mind-blowingly, why on earth wasn't it proceeded with? We have seen talk about central government actually stepping in to deal with it because...
Councillor Voisey, can I bring you to your question, please? Can you
What
quickly?
What negative or what impact is that going to have on the city deal's long-term viability?
Thank you, Councillor. I'm sure Frank wants to come in first on this with a business perspective, because I am but a mere officer, but I do have some wider perspectives on points of leverage that I think we can use around this. But Frank, I'm sure you want to get in first with a very, very clear business view on this, don't you?
Yes, thank you, Kelly. We've made it very clear, certainly I have in the press, as to our views on this decision and how it is not good for business, how it is not good for Wales, the message it sends out to companies outside of Wales, and the impact it also has on international visitors who unfortunately turn up and find themselves stranded on either side of the tunnel. So we're very clear of the importance that this M4 relief road plays to the future and the growth of business, and are still going to and will continue to try and use our influence wherever we can to put our voice out there as well, because I haven't met anybody in business who is in agreement with this, and we're heavily supported by all of the business organisations from FSB, CBI and IOD and so forth. So it's not just the REGP's opinion, it is, I think, in the main, the view of business across Wales.
I think, Mr. Mayor, if I can just add to that, and I think Councillor David, something that was agreed at the last Regional Transport Authority was we've got to have something much more muscular to UK government in terms of our asks and our offer around future transport investment. The Cardiff Capital Region has been massively underserved in terms of high-level investment in transport. And as part of our Levelling Up prospectus now, we want to go back and make very clear what those key transport schemes are going to be, recognising things are changing all of the time. But, if you look at the impact of HS2, and I'm not saying that's a good or a bad thing, but it will have an economic impact on the Cardiff Capital Region. So, some of the basic asks around Crossrail, electrification, You know, even down to some very local issues that we have around the bus network and how that's geared up at the moment. We've got to have a stronger platform for raising these issues and not just saying, help us, we need this. We've got to make an investment case for this stuff, which is why we've made such a strong investment in getting the right evidence to support these asks when we go to UK and Wales governments.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Frank. Is that answered, Councillor Voisey?
It's gone some way, but clearly, hopefully, come May next year, we'll have a new administration that will review it.
Let's not have any grandstanding this afternoon, is it? Because we could mention the fact that it's your administration that actually cancelled rail electrification. So we won't go into that this afternoon. Councillor Gareth Howells, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to thank Kelly and Frank for that very informative presentation. And as a councillor in the Upper Llinvi Valley, and I'm not going to go on about the Caira heat project and that to bore people, but I saw references to other projects in the area. And particularly, can I confirm that the Awenny Road site in the Llinvi Valley has been considered as a project and it can be progressed through the scheme? And particularly, I think there may be an opportunity there to provide affordable housing and to help with decarbonisation or zero carbon. And I'd also like to ask the question about transport, because we are really keen in Llinvi Valley to have the half-hour train service introduced, because it is an impediment to people commuting to Cardiff, and if you're moving away from cars, using public transport is going to be essential. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Gareth.
Thank you very much, Councillor Howells, for your question. And yes, Mark may be closer to this than I, but I understand that Awenny Road is one of two schemes that Bridgend intends on submitting to the Housing Viability Gap Fund, and certainly recognise your ambitions around affordable housing and zero carbon. Very much to be welcomed. And again, would endorse exactly what you've just said around the half-hour train service. And one of the things that I think Councillor David again has been very much committed to is this concept of Metro Plus, making sure that we have ongoing investment in local sustainable transport schemes. And again, we have all of the levers to do that through the wider investment fund. So very much welcome your comments and thank you for your support, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Howells. Next, I have Councillor Ken Watts, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Kelly and Frank, for a very illuminating report, very interesting. I have two just quick questions. I believe, Kelly, you said that the UK government has no plans for any further city deals. And I'd like to know if I heard that correctly. Why is that? There must be a reason for their thinking. And secondly, my point is that this is a long-term project and the costs are laid out now. But as I think we all know, costs and plans have an awful habit of spiraling out of control. And you mentioned HS2, which is a prime example. So what is in place in the future years to increase or supply the correct amount of funding, which will surely increase over the years? Thank you.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Watts, for your questions. I think that the point that I was making around city deals in the future, and I think Councillor David will recall probably at my interview, I was asked, when are you going to get us another city deal? And I said, I'm not. I'm going to make this one last forever. And I think that's the point, isn't it? It's not about spending down one programme and jump into the next. It's seeing this now as a sustainable platform from which to lever future funding opportunities. UK government MHCLG have, I think, come to the same conclusion. And what they don't want to do now is to create more programmes. The idea is there's plenty of money and resources. If you look at UK research and innovation, as I've said, a £6.5 billion annual budget. And what the expectation is now is that we use our city deal as a platform, as leverage, So, you know, we don't go and ask for big funding amounts. We use what we have to leverage, to co-invest, to co-fund. So we're always taking that ability to use what we have to bring in more. So it's very much that investment-based mindset that I was talking about at the beginning. In terms of costs and plans spiraling, you know, this isn't so much about costs, it's about risk and reward, it's about return on investment. It's making sure that when we make an investment, it gets repaid. That if we look at equity, for example, you know, we're putting equity into companies that can convert to loans, or that we can ensure can pay out and replenish the wider investment fund. And I think in terms of plans to increase that supply of investment in the future, you know, Cabinet have made a very robust response to Regional Investment Wales, the Shared Prosperity Fund. Our Levelling Up prospectus now will set out very clearly our investment ask in terms of transport, infrastructure, the £33 billion going into research and development. But unless we have the evidence, good decision making, we're clear about what needs to be done, it's very hard to mount some of those arguments, which is why we're trying to do all of this work at a city region scale at the same time as we're delivering a city deal. So hopefully, Councillor Watts, that's gone some way to answering the question. And Frank, I'm not sure if you have anything.
If I could just add to that, I think it's worth knowing that from the very first meeting that I chaired, we set out to make sure that we had the right governance in place, the right systems, the right frameworks, so that we could be trusted as an entity, not just to advise and assess investments, but to actually deliver them, but also to gain the trust of not just local government, Welsh government, but UK government. And as you all know, we've become a much more competitive regional economy. And I just wanted to make sure, and so do my colleagues, that the Cardiff Capital Region can stand up against any of them, because that's what we haven't been doing for many, many years. It's now our turn to pitch up, look for funding, not just from private sector sources, but there will be opportunities, as Kelly's mentioned, in other areas. We want to make sure that our region gets its fair share of the funding that it deserves. And for that, we've set ourselves up in the way that we've described today.
Thank you, Frank.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I wish you both every success. And obviously, it's a long game, so some of us will be here to see it, and others won't.
Thank you, Ken. I'm just going to ask Andrew, is the presentation still running from your slide? I've turned it off from mine, but if it is, could you turn it off, please? I have received a message to say that one councillor can still see it. Before I move to the next question, I'm going to bring in Councillor Hugh David, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to respond to that question from Councillor Watts. It was a good question, and to emphasise one of the many important points that Kelly and Frank have made already, is that we don't see ourselves as a granting agency. We see ourselves as an investment engine for the region, and we will see a return on that investment. So we're creating an evergreen fund that will see money come back, and the indications are our first investment is working very well, isn't it, Kelly? We will get that return, and we'll be able to invest in more businesses and more jobs in the future. But because of the success of the model, we are able to secure additional funding, particularly from UK government in terms of research and other private and public sector funding that goes beyond our original commitment and doesn't require any additional match funding from Bridgend County Borough Council because of the success and the quality and the robustness of the projects that we are putting together. So the latest example is around digital connectivity. I can't believe there isn't a councillor here that doesn't have complaints from residents about the digital broadband and the capability for residents or businesses. And we are, as we speak, in the midst of delivering major substantial change right across the city region. But critically, we are working with global players that will invest in broadband technology. They would not be even thinking about investing in Bridgend alone. If we made a pitch as Bridgend County Borough Council, 140,000 people, when we make a pitch to those businesses that we are part of a capital region that has half the population of a country in it, and it's one of the fastest growing capital regions in the UK, or regions in the UK, and certainly the fastest growing capital region, there's only 4 of them. Because we're part of that, then investors will look at us, and they're looking at us now, and they will invest in us, and they will invest shortly in the IT infrastructure that will benefit every community in Bridgend County Borough. And that is the difference that being part of the Cardiff Capital City region will make to our residents in the future.
Thank you, Leader. I think it's obvious. It resonates, doesn't it? This is about size and scale. Next question then, Councillor Tim Thomas, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Kelly and Frank, for the very interesting presentation. My question is, given Bridgend's location in Wales, many of our communities are in quite close proximity to the Swansea City deal. I'm just a little bit concerned that we could be competing region against region and creating a race to the bottom in terms of wages and business incentives, such as business rates. So I'd just be quite interested to know what safeguards are in place to prevent that from happening, and how are you collaborating with the Swansea City deal as well? Thanks.
Thank you, Tim. Kelly.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Thomas. I know Frank will want to come on this as well, because he's done a lot of work with the Swansea Bay City deal. And Councillor Thomas, the answer is a simple one. We talk a lot, and we make sure that we're aligned, that, okay, when we know that we're bidding into UK government, sometimes there are crossovers, and sometimes we play on those, because those interfaces are important, not just for the Cardiff Capital Region, but for Swansea, for Mid Wales, who we've been talking to, and for North Wales. We regularly get together to make sure proposals are aligned. And to give you one example, that £44 million I was talking about in terms of the Strength in Places Fund, we had £26 million grant from UK government. The rest is made up of what we've leveraged from partners. That's beyond the Cardiff Capital Region. That involves Swansea University and some of our partners there. So we don't cut the Cardiff Capital Region off in geographical terms if those strengths are broader based. So we can make sure that, the competition in terms of a race to the bottom is not there, because this is about collaboration, not competition. And my view is, anything we can bring into Wales is really important. This isn't just about the Cardiff Capital Region. We'll only do well if other parts of the nation do well. So high levels of collaboration. Do we get everything right all of the time? Probably not. But as we've said already, this is a learning journey. We're in it for the long game. And I think if we keep those lines of communication open as we do, then it's Wales that stands to benefit, not just individual regions.
I think it's just worth adding to that, Councillor Thomas, that the Swansea City deal is of a different structure to ours. Ours is very much an economic growth programme. Theirs is very much project-led, and specific projects have already been identified. So, but in terms of collaboration, I speak to the current interim chair once a week, and we keep a very close eye, because one thing neither of us want to do is cannibalise our individual regions and our economies. That would make no sense whatsoever, and that extends further east to the Western Gateway. Again, there is no intention for us to duplicate, because all we'll do is shrink our individual economies if we do so. So there is no logical sense in doing that, and I am comforted by the fact that you may have seen recently Swansea University's announcement of its 30 million investment in the Semiconductor Centre of Excellence. That is absolute collaboration with our compound semi cluster. So we are working collaboratively. This is, as Kelly said, not just about the region, it is about Wales, but we need to focus on keeping good relationships as we are with North Wales as well. So yes, I think it's a well put question. It's an important question to answer, but I'm sure that Kelly and I and my board certainly would agree that we don't see any race to the bottom whatsoever in this context.
Is that okay, Tim?
Yeah, thanks very much.
Thanks, Tim.
And thanks both.
Thank you.
Okay, next I have Councillor Charles Smith, please. Who's in his garden?
Sorry, just trying to unmute there. Yeah, I think Councillor Thomas's question is relevant to mine, actually. I was thinking of the fact that Bridgend is on the border with another region as an opportunity rather than as a disadvantage. And I think that transport and connectivity are key to economic development in Bridgend. Bridgend has always been what you might call a transport hub. It's been a place you go to catch a bus or to change a bus, or to change a train to go to 3 different valleys, or to go to the Vale, or you'd go to Pyle Junction to change for Porthcawl. And I think Councillor Young and myself are very keen that people coming from the western part of Wales shouldn't go into Cardiff and then come back out of Cardiff to go to Cardiff Airport, for example. On the Cardiff Airport Consultative Committee, we've been arguing strongly that we should be working to make sure that Bridgend is the hub for people coming from the west towards Cardiff Airport. So I think there are opportunities there. As a Pyle, I know I'm posh now and I live in Bridgend, but I'm a Pyle boy really, and as a Pyle boy I'm very interested in Pyle Station, and I will regard that as a bellwether, as an indicator of how successful the city deal actually is, because Pyle has been out on a limb. It's got a very irregular train service. The only time the train service was ever invested in really was in connection with the Swan Line, so that looked westwards towards Swansea rather than eastwards towards Cardiff. I think if we can put some investment into Pyle, if we can in the first instance get a clock face regular hourly service on weekdays and a 2-hourly one on Sundays rather than the 2 hours and 4-hour irregular services we've got now. If we can get a proper integrated park and ride there with a bus intermodal exchange to take buses rapidly to Porthcawl, I think that sort of development will convince people that the city region isn't just for Cardiff, but it's for the extremities as well. Could I remind you that Pyle has never been properly integrated into the Valleys lines. People in Pyle haven't benefited from cheap fares and the through ticketing that people in the valleys get. And we're on the main line. My worry is that being on the main line is actually being a disadvantage to Bridgend and Pyle.
Thank you, Charles. Obviously, as a portfolio member for the regeneration, you've more a statement than a question there. I've got Malcolm James next, please.
Thank you. I did put a question mark at the end, Stuart.
I must have missed the question mark.
So thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is, by the way, thank you very much for the presentation, Kelly and Frank. How do you feel the COVID-19 will impact on going forward with some of these plans, you know, considering the cost it's been to the government? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor, and it's a great question. And, you know, the truthful answer is I don't know if any of us can hand on heart say we know. It's such a volatile situation. I could give you all kinds of assurances that everything will be okay, but, you know, it wouldn't be truthful to say that, so I won't. All I can tell you is that we've kicked the tyres of all of our existing schemes. We've put them through the ringer. We've made sure they're relevant. We've changed schemes. So strategic premises, first of all, was very much focused on commercial office space. Well, we all know where that's going. So I think that the key to this is making sure that we can stay adaptable. It's not believing our own hype and that we know best, because that is definitely not the case. It's bringing the right experts in the right way. And one of the things that Frank and I did very, very quickly off the back of COVID-19, when we first went into lockdown, was to do a really comprehensive business survey, not just send out forms, but talk to people. And Frank, you do this all the time in your day job, but you very much believe in talking to the customer. And we took all of that feedback, and that's what enabled us to formulate our response. So in the first instance, our response was about working with businesses and local authorities to make sure they were accessing economic stimulus packages, because many weren't. We kicked the tires on our schemes. We looked at what needed to be done differently, like the Clusters Fund, like the Challenge Fund. We haven't got all the answers, so we want to experiment and try out new things. And I think the other area massively is around support for medium-sized companies. We don't have big anchor companies in the region. We've got a lot of medium-sized companies. And the issue is, if those companies go or falter, you'll see, the ripple effects right down to the smaller companies through the supply chains. So we have to take care of those. So, the short answer is, I don't know. We have to do our best and adapt and prepare as best we can. But in terms of a silver bullet, Councillor James, I don't think there is one. We just have to keep on it all of the time, and I think that's the best thing we can do.
Thank you, Carrie. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Mr. Mayor, is it just worth saying, Kelly, Frank, that obviously we're opening up this challenge fund now, and we are inviting expressions of interest from businesses across the region, and particularly in Bridgend, to come up with some of the solutions, because we simply don't have those solutions at the moment. We don't even know what some of those problems will be yet, do we? Because the pandemic is continuing to change society fundamentally, isn't it, in all sorts of different ways. But we have moved quickly to develop that fund so that smart, successful businesses that do have potential solutions can apply, and we'll certainly look at the proposals because there's potential opportunities there, and we've seen that with some of our businesses already that are growing rapidly because of the developments, for example, in life sciences and medtech.
Yes, correct. Thank you, Councillor David. I think this is probably one of the more innovative aspects of the plan. It addresses the pillar of resilience and being able to deal with those things which knock you down. And to coin the Japanese phrase, you fall 7 times, but you get up 8. And that's been factored into our investment framework as well. The challenge funds are really to address some of the industrial challenges that we know are amongst us, but also new market creation, shaping places, commercializing intellectual property, and addressing some of the priorities and social inclusion, economic inclusion that Kelly's alluded to earlier. And we are very keen to get this underway. It will create opportunities for companies that want, in their own right, generate solutions which will give them the opportunity to grow their businesses as well. So I always saw the Challenge Fund as being the sort of entry level for companies that do come up with these solutions to come back at some future stage for more funding to enable them to grow those businesses in their locality. And so it's a very exciting aspect of the industrial plan and of the investment framework. But like everything else and everything we've spoken, this will not be grant money. This will be repayable, and it will be, for risk and reward, because we want that money to go back into the economy and enable other companies to benefit from it.
Thank you, Frank. And I did like that saying about falling over 7 times but getting up 8. And Kelly will remember one from her Monmouthshire days about fail fast, fail forward. So making sure that everything is a learning experience. Before I go on to my next question, Councillor Carolyn Webster has asked if she can put a question mark on the end of Charles's question, saying what plans for Pyle and Porthcawl reintegrated transport. So I'm sorry, Charles, if I missed that bit of your question.
Thank you, Caroline. You, my friend. Stuart isn't.
You're welcome, Charles.
Do you want me to respond to that, Mr. Mayor? So just to remind colleagues, and it's a good question from Councillor Webster and Councillor Smith. I'm pleased that you've flagged up one of our flagship projects. So we have committed funding. We've secured funding from Welsh Government, committed City Deal funding to Pyle Park and Ride, but that has evolved and is now a project that will improve transport at both Pyle and at Porthcawl, because we know the bus infrastructure in Porthcawl is not what it should be for a modern, busy seaside resort, and the plans are now to make a major investment in improving those physical infrastructure that's available, and also then working with Transport for Wales and ensuring that there's stronger links between Pyle and Porthcawl, because it is the nearest railway station for Porthcawl.
Thank you,
Thanks for that question.
Is that okay, Carolyn?
Yes, super. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Okay, next question then, Councillor Ross Penhale-Thomas, please.
Thanks very much, Chair, and thank you both for your presentation. Very interesting and insightful to see what's going on across the region. My question is very similar and follows on quite well from Councillor Malcolm James's question around the impact of COVID, and in particular, and it's all very well documented, the impact that COVID has had, in particular economically and socio-economically, and across the protected characteristic spectrum as well. I think what I'm looking for really is an assurance that, given evidence that will continue to emerge of the impact of COVID economically, both hyper-locally, locally, regionally and nationally, perhaps internationally as well, that there's the flexibility within the overarching strategy for the city-region deal to respond to those changing circumstances and evidence that becomes available to us. I'm just thinking, obviously, we're in a recession at the moment. That's very unfortunately likely to get worse. You've got businesses going to the wall, very unfortunately again. Many more are likely to come forward, and there's insecurity of employment. A lot of people are very anxious about what the future holds for them. And we've obviously had forward year in Britain. So yeah, just looking for that assurance really that that there is that flexibility underneath the overarching plan, that we can respond to the evidence that will be forthcoming, and that we can make sure that that the city region deal is ready to respond.
Mr. Mayor, am I okay to respond
yes,
to that?
Yes, of course, Kelly, yes. Obviously,
yeah,
your previous question were around assurances, but I suppose this is just a question around assurance of flexibility.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's an excellent and really well-timed question, because I think any city deal that stands still or takes its evidence base from a point in time won't be a success. So I think making sure that evidence base is up to date. I mean, I'm reading stuff coming out of ONS weekly now in terms of not just the sectors that are being impacted, but the impact on women, on minority groups, on young people in particular. And, you know, these present very serious issues, and I think they have to shape the future interventions. So I think we're acutely aware that we've got to have balance in our programme. And Councillor, I hope we've reassured you so far that this isn't just open to great, you know, innovative private sector applications, even though that's important. There's a role and an interventionist role for the public sector to step in and make sure the right things are done as well. And going back to my slide deck, you know, I hope I try to illustrate that, you know, the economy is only a means to an end anyway. We want things to get better. We want to improve lives. You know, we don't want to see third generation worklessness in Blaenau Gwent. And those things, if we're not delivering on some of those societal impacts, you know, we won't get this thing right. So for me, you know, given my background, where I come from, some of the things that I feel passionate about, I think that is especially important. And I know the 10 leaders, if they were all here today, would say exactly the same things.
Thank you, Kelly.
Councillor, if I could just add to that very, very quickly, and that is that on one of the slides we showed 3 publications. each one addressing one of the pillars of our industrial plan. And to keep that evidence base up to date, we actually have appointed 2 PhD students who are constantly monitoring the data, because, being blunt, it wasn't available when we started this program. It was very disjointed. Nobody had actually gone to the trouble of pulling together a whole raft of resources and information to try and get a clearer picture of what makes the region tick and what are its shortcomings and what are its strengths. And therefore, we embarked upon that in the run-up to putting the plan together. But as Kelly has said, the plan has to be flexible, constantly monitored and constantly updated. None of us could have predicted the impact, or which we still don't know. I call it actually seeing round corners, because that's where we all are at the moment. But we have, continued to check that our sense of direction, our roadmap, is still relevant today as it was when we put the plan together. And that, as far as I'm concerned, and I think Kelly would agree with me, and I'm hoping that the Cabinet do as well, I'm sure they will, it is still very much under scrutiny. But the evidence base is fundamental. In business, you don't make investment decisions without the best quality data, and that's for us, we cannot proceed without that. And it's for that very reason that I mentioned earlier on in the beginning of this discussion, that there were £800 million of PET projects, and individually they may have had merit, collectively they made no sense. And we actually went through the scrutiny of effectively knocking them all out because they didn't make sense as far as the plan was concerned.
Thank you, Frank.
And Mr. Mayor, the challenge fund that we've launched is a classic example of how we've actually shown and demonstrated that we have been able to respond to the pandemic. So that is something we'll continue to do. We've shown real flexibility and fleet of foot, haven't we, to be able to reshape our programme so that it responds to the needs of communities and businesses now, not to what they were just 6 months ago. But that isn't just planning it or thinking about it. We're doing something about it now. And none of us know, do we, what, as Frank has so eloquently put it, what is round the corner, and there could be lots and lots of corners, couldn't there? So we're going to need to continue to show that flexibility and fleet of foot in the future, but that City Deal is structured in such a way so that it's got that, whereas other city deals are very much aligned to certain fixed projects. With the Cardiff City Deal, we're funding a vision and a programme and the industries and infrastructures of the future, but that will change. That is going to change in the coming months and the coming years, and we've got the agility to respond to that and change in response to the circumstances out there as they change very rapidly. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Hugh. I think it's rather than lots of corners, I think we're on a very curved road. So it just shows the continued flexibility that's required to be able to continue to deliver this programme. My last question I have is Councillor Richard Young, please. And I won't take any more after that, then we'll move on to the next agenda item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, but can I apologise to you? I'm afraid it's not a question, it's more of a comment. Okay. I was very interested in the question from Councillor Tim Thomas. I thought it was quite a pertinent question, to be perfectly honest with you. And I'd like to support what Councillor Charles Smith gave as an answer. I think the fact that we have the two projects running next to each other benefits Bridgend, to be perfectly honest with you. I think Bridgend is uniquely placed to take advantage of aspects of both areas. For instance, we have a number of high-profile companies, international companies, wanting to move into the Cardiff Capital Region. We have high-profile companies wanting to move into Bridgend. They are expecting to move here and invest in the area, expecting good connectivity, both, I should imagine, to the London area and other areas within England. And also, of course, let's not forget these companies are global. They will be wanting their chief executives and the like to have easy access to their investments within this area. And I don't think that those investments will be in the Cardiff City region in isolation. I do believe that there's an opportunity here to open the west of Wales, and I think that will be taken. We are uniquely placed. We are looking to create a hub within Bridgend for travel along the lines of a railway station. As it's been said, it is the second busiest railway station in the region. It's actually the 5th busiest in Wales, so it's quite an important area. It's uniquely placed because we've got a link. It's a 2-line link through to the airport, and I don't know if a lot of people realise that Bridgend is only 22 minutes away from the airport by rail. So if we got high-powered, shall we say, executives flying into Cardiff Airport, hoping to reach their assets in a reasonable amount of time, Bridgend is in a position there to help with that. And I think it's also reasonable to expect that those people that live in Bridgend, especially, let's take it from the Porthcawl area, rather than travelling into Bridgend itself, because that can become congested to travel to work or to meetings. The idea behind that, and this is why Pyle becomes so important to us, is the fact that they can access railway activity at Pyle. They can go west, they can go east, and in that respect, they can get to wherever they want to go in a reasonable amount of time. So I don't view this as competition. I don't view Swansea region as competition. I think both regions are very different in nature, but their aspirations are interlinked. So I'm very, very optimistic for the future, and I know that Bridgend can take advantage of that future, and I am really pleased that we are in a position to maximise our contribution to the future of Wales.
Thank you, Richard. I am going to propose now, and thank you, Kelly, and thank you, Frank. Your presentation today has been illuminating for all of us. The amount of content that shows the activity that is going on, not just across Bridgend, but across the entire county, actually just emphasises the need for that level of investment, connectivity and ambition and drive. So thank you both. You are welcome to stay, but I have no doubt that you would care to leave either. We stay because we're councillors, you don't have to. But thank you very much for today, and I look forward to seeing you again in the future.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you also for taking the time to listen to us this afternoon.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you, Kelly. It is 5 to 5. I am going to propose a 5-minute comfort break for people because we still do have several items left to cover on the agenda, and that was quite a long presentation and question and answer session, which was warranted, but I want to give people the opportunity to be able to have just 5 minutes comfort. 4 now, actually. I'll need you all back by 5 o'clock, please. Thank you. Andrew, can we just pause the recording for the time being? The agenda item, let me just say exactly what it is. Agenda item 11.1, which is to receive the following question to the Executive from Councillor Tim Thomas to the Cabinet Member, Wellbeing and Future Generations. Will the Cabinet Member outline their plans to reduce the risk of homelessness during the continued concern of COVID-19 pandemic? Tim, I understand you've had a written response. Do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, I do, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, thank you ever so much for allowing me to ask the question earlier. I'm very grateful for that. And I'm also grateful for the Cabinet Member for supplying the question and joining me on a very interesting visit of Bryn Menyn Hostel. I'm very grateful for her for that. My question, I'll be as quick as I can. In conversation with the Welsh Veterans Partnership, a charity that supports veterans, obviously, they have told me that former armed forces veterans are particularly vulnerable to homelessness, and the risk is intensified since the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm just wondering what we as an authority are doing to reduce the risk of homelessness for armed forces veterans. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Tim. Councillor Patel, please.
Sorry, I wasn't back from my 5-minute break.
Okay.
Sorry, what have I missed?
The question was that Tim had identified that during the pandemic, and the veterans are susceptible or extremely susceptible to homelessness during this pandemic. The question was around what actions this local authority is taking to assist veterans during the pandemic in relation to their homelessness situation.
So I guess my response is that we are working with the third sector bodies that support all homelessness cases, including the veteran-specific charities, supporting them. And, you know, I'm sure you're aware that we've signed a covenant to ensure that we meet our commitments to the homelessness population, the veteran population.
Okay, obviously as well, I'm aware that we have a Armed Forces Covenant champion, Councillor Richard Young. Is there anything you would like to add to the answer by the question by Councillor Tim Thomas?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Patel is quite right. We actively support all veterans charities and are in constant contact with veterans charities. It was only last week that we were informed by a veterans charity that there was a vulnerable ex-serviceman who was homeless. We have contacted that individual. We have found him temporary accommodation. Both the Forces Charity and we are now looking for a more permanent place for him. So we are being proactive and we are being ultra sensitive. But as Councillor Patel said, it's also a fact that we are doing this for all homeless people, Mr. Mayor. It just happens that veterans are in there as well, and we are aware that some veterans are more vulnerable than others, and we are constantly talking to the charities that are there to help them.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Yes, and I suppose it is worth adding the vulnerability is vulnerability irrespective of which group you come from. So yes, the actions are being taken in relation to all those that are vulnerable under the homeless persons legislation. Tim, does that answer your supplementary? Okay.
I'm very grateful you let me move this up the agenda. I could press it a little further, but I won't.
Perhaps I could invite you then.
I'll follow up with a written question.
Yes, that's what I was going to suggest. If you perhaps follow up with a written question, then at least you will get a fuller answer in relation to that. I just feel
that they have specific needs, but I'll follow that up in the written question. So thanks to everyone. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if he could address that to me, I will ensure that he gets a full and considered response to the request. I think I've got an idea of one of the cases he may highlight, so I'm more than happy to supply him with all the information that he needs.
Thank you. Okay, we do have a question from Councillor Nicole Burnett, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, well, we've had extensive discussions over how to deal with homelessness coming out of COVID during our COVID recovery panel discussions, which Councillor Thomas is part of. But I was wondering if Councillor Patel could give us more information on sort of partnership working and what sort of response we've had from other partners, not just BCBC, during the pandemic.
Thank you, Councillor Burnett. Should I answer the Mayor?
Yes, please, Denisha.
Okay, so in terms of our strategic objective, obviously it is a collaborative approach that we would like to take in addressing homelessness, and I think that was outlined in the written response. We have worked with three kind of three main groups during the pandemic. So the third sector, and they've been a major factor in allowing us to respond quickly to the challenges presented during the pandemic. Partners such as the Wallich, Pobl, Kailas have worked really closely with us to deliver temporary housing and provide support. And as I mentioned in the written response, the support element is the key part to helping people remain in housing. The third sector and ourselves, our housing solutions team, meet once a week, and they review all the individual cases and how to react to the needs of those residents. And I think it's quite a flexible and pragmatic approach, which is a positive reflection of the strong relationship between ourselves and the third sector partners. South Wales Police are another key partner that we've been working with during the pandemic, and we do anyway, but they've really worked with us to ensure that any incidences of antisocial behaviour that result from any housing services have been responded to quickly. They've also done preemptive work to ensure that there's a visible presence in locations where we have placed people, and they provide us with data in terms of any complaints that have come forward from the community. Our third and probably again a key group of people that have worked with us is local businesses, and by this I mean hoteliers and B&Bs. And they've been really supportive. Before lockdown and before March, we didn't really have much of a relationship with them because we didn't really need to use their services that much, but obviously over the lockdown we have placed people in hotels and B&Bs, and the feedback that's come from them is that it's actually had a really positive effect on their businesses in terms of their economy, and they're happy to support us going forward if we need to if we ever need their services again. And then I guess the fourth one missing from the three key ones was the RSLs, and they have worked with us to a limited extent, I'd say, and that's just because the fact that they furloughed a lot of their staff, but they did come to our rapid recovery panel, and they have been working with us in order to help house the people that they can accommodate for.
Thank you, Denisha. Does that answer your question okay, Nicole?
Yes, absolutely, thank you.
Okay, I have no other questions in relation to that, so I am going to save the next question after we've gone back to the other agenda items. So we will go on to report for the Interim Chief Officer Finance Performance and Change on the Annual Treasury Management Outturn Report for 2019-2020.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In Jill's absence, I'm going to present the report today, if that's okay with you. It's for the record, it's Deborah Exton, the Interim Deputy Head of Finance.
Yes, hi Deborah, welcome.
Thank you, thank you. The purpose of the report is to comply with the CIPFA Code of Practice on Treasury Management in the Public Services. And the requirement is that we have to present an overview of Treasury management activities for the preceding financial year, and also report on the Treasury management indicators for the previous financial year as well. So this is a position statement really going back to the 2019-20 financial year. So I'll try to be quite brief because obviously it is a position statement and we've moved on since then. So in terms of the background, obviously we've got statutory reporting requirements that we have to comply with, and this is one of those requirements that are placed on us through the CIPFA Code. Also, just for information, we've actually reappointed Arling Close as our Treasury Management Advisors just recently in September. So they will be in place as our advisors for the next 4 financial years, and you'll be aware that obviously we've been working with them over previous years. So that gives us quite good assurance that they obviously know our financial position, and obviously, you know, they know the level of investments that we've been making and that where we are with our financial position. So turning to the section 4.1, the current situation, as you're all aware, it's been quite a challenging economic and financial climate in recent times, and this kind of exacerbated towards the end of the last financial year with uncertainties around Brexit, the general election, and then obviously the COVID pandemic towards the end of the financial year. And the Bank of England responded to that with changes to the base rates, and they actually took, you know, unprecedented action in actually reducing the base rate down twice in March to its current level of just 0.1%. In terms of our overview position, that's outlined quite well in section 4 in table 1, and it shows that in terms of our borrowing, we didn't undertake any new borrowing in the financial year, and our position was the same at the financial year end as it was at the start of the year. We used any internal reserves where possible. In terms of the investments, which is in the bottom half of the table, our total investments grew just slightly from 27 million to 30 million, and majority of that is held with local authorities, which are deemed to be a low credit risk investment counterparty. So, you know, that's quite a common practice for local authorities to invest with each other. And we set out our indicators within our treasury management strategy in terms of how much we would invest with one local authority and for how long. So we comply with all our treasury management indicators in that respect. In terms of the report, attached at Appendix A, we have a summary of all the main treasury management activities during the year, and there's quite a lot of tables in there and information. So I don't propose to go through all those, but I'm happy to take any questions on those if required. As I said, we've complied with all our requirements. In terms of what we look for when we're investing, obviously the criteria that we'd look to put in place first so that we're securing the council's funds. So security of funds are most important, and then liquidity, so access to those funds as soon as is possible if we're able to, and that's before seeking any kind of high rates of return or high rates of interest. Because obviously the higher the level of interest you look for, then, you know, the more risky your investment usually is. And I think in this kind of economic climate, that's quite important, particularly with the, you know, council funding as it is. So in terms of the treasury management indicators that we've set out in the appendix, we've complied with all those, and we're operating in line with all of our approved limits. So really, I just wanted to take you to the recommendations, and that is to approve the treasury management activities and to approve the treasury management indicators for the financial year. Thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Deborah. Before we move to questions, can I have a mover and a second, please?
Happy to move the report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. Seconder, please. Who was that then? Sorry.
Altaf.
Thank you, Altaf. Okay, questions then, please. Councillor Alex Williams, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'd like to thank Deb for her report as well. As you know, I'm a member of the Audit Committee as well, along with other colleagues, and I'd just like perhaps Deb to reinforce what she said already about county councils borrowing to other county councils. A number of colleagues may have seen a potentially misleading social media post quite recently on county council borrowing, and perhaps this would be an opportunity to set the record straight that it's a standard practice to borrow to other local authorities, and perhaps the Deputy Leader could also comment on this.
I'm happy to come back on that, Mr. Mayor. First of all, the Treasury Management Strategy is it's approved by full council. Therefore, all 54 councillors own that strategy. It's our strategy, and the officers merely implement that strategy on our behalf. And obviously, within that, we make best use of our funds and we invest it wisely within the parameters of that strategy. Occasionally, we draw down funds for allocated projects that we need to invest, and quite often other local authorities are the best means of investment for that very short period of time. But, it's not that this money that we've got to spend freely and we just invest it. All money is allocated within our capital programme, and when we need it, then we draw it down and we use it as the policy dictates. And if you want to add to that, Deb.
Deborah, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Williams. Yes, I mean, I think there was some kind of misunderstanding in respect of the money that we are investing, and it is a cash flow issue, it is a timing issue in terms of we get Welsh Government grant funding at the beginning of every month, but clearly, for example, we don't pay most of our staff until to either the middle or the end of the month. So you have that money, it is committed, but it's obviously sitting in the bank until it's paid out. And a lot of our investments, particularly to local authorities, are very short term. They can be for a small number of days, they can be just for a couple of weeks, and that money is always repaid. We've never had any defaults from any local authorities. But also, it's reinvesting the same money as well, which is another kind of, confusion really. So we could start off with £1 million at the beginning of the year, which we invest, and that gets repaid, and we invest it again. So it looks like we've invested a lot over the year, but it could be just the same £1 million. So I think it's quite important, to say that, and also that it is common practice amongst local authorities, and our Treasury Management advisors, are highly supportive of us investing with other local authorities. We obviously take their advice on any investments that we make, and we wouldn't put the council's money at risk, obviously, unnecessarily.
Thank you. Councillor Alex Williams, is that okay? Does that answer what you asked?
Yes, I think the clarity is important for the record, and I'm grateful. Thank you.
Yes, I agree. I think the clarity in relation to the borrowing or us lending is important to make sure that fact is in the public realm. Councillor Voisey, I'm sorry, I seem to have missed your question that was at 5:11. Is it in relation to the previous question in relation to homelessness?
No, it's in relation to the presentation on the finance.
Okay, would you like to ask your question then?
Thank you. It's to do with the actual borrowing of money and the LOBO that we use for funding. I was a little bit confused reading it, whether the break in January, July, whether we can renegotiate the funding or whether it's the lender has an option. And obviously, all the time we are looking for lower costs of funding, especially with interest rates that are record low. Because I note in table 4, the benefits of 1% reduction is nearly £250,000. So can you confirm that we are constantly looking for cheaper sources of funding to help make the revenue budget go further? That's my question, not a statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Howell, do you want to come in on that, or shall I bring in Deborah first?
Well, sorry, would you like me to answer that?
Yeah, okay.
I'll bring you in first, Deborah, and then if the deputy...
The lender borrowing option means it's the lender that actually has the option, not the borrower.
Okay. Yeah, yes, exactly. The LOBO obviously stands for lender option, borrower option. So what happens is the lender has the option at a break point to propose a new rate. And the borrower then, ourselves, has the option as to whether or not we accept that rate or whether we repay the whole loan. I mean, as you can see from the table, the rates that when we took the loans out, and they're 50-year loans, they're very long term, the rate was 4.65%. So obviously in this current economic climate and the low interest rates that we've got now, the lender's not likely to reduce the rates at all. They're going to keep with the high rates. So unless we could obviously repay the loans, and obviously that's quite a significant amount of money outstanding, which we don't have that, and take out cheaper loans, then we're kind of committed to those LOBOs until they expire, or until, you know, the economic climate changes quite significantly from now.
Sorry, Deborah, if you could indulge me. So what would be the impact on us as a local authority? Because would there be significant break clauses if we try to do that as well?
Yes, there are. There are quite significant kind of what's the word? Penalties then for repaying early for ourselves if we were to try and buy ourselves out of that, as is usually the case with any kind of long-term commitment, because obviously they would lose significant amounts of interest from this.
Thank you. I don't have any other questions in relation to that. Matthew, was your question answered okay?
It was, but it would be actually quite interesting to know what, you know, if there would be an opportunity to look to see what the costs would be and whether it's something that cheaper money would cover on that particular source of funding, especially as rates are rock bottom. It would just be an interesting exercise to see if there would be some savings. So maybe that's something that could be put in the next report. Thank you.
Yeah, that's something we can have a look at that, obviously, and see how feasible that is and come back with that.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Leader, there's nothing else you'd like to add to that, is there? No. Okay. So no other questions in relation to that. All in favour? I'll take silence as acceptance.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Okay, we will move on to the next agenda item then, and that is agenda item 8, report of Chief Executive. Update corporate plan 2018-2022 reviewed for 2020-21 following impact of COVID-19. And could I bring in Mark, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and for the benefit of the recordings, I think I forgot earlier, I'm Mark Shepherd, Chief Executive. As you say, the purpose of this report is to seek Council approval to updates to the Council's corporate plan, particularly the fact that we've reviewed it for this current financial year following the impact of COVID-19, and then to adopt the revised corporate plan. Again, what we have, leaders, Mr. Mayor, is a relatively short report, but actually some lengthy appendices. So what I propose doing is not going through it at great length, but picking out some of the highlights and some of the changes in particular. The background, of course, is that the original corporate plan was approved by Council pre-pandemic in February 2020. And of course, you'll recognise that some of the priorities, the objectives, the measures, and indeed some of the risks will have changed quite significantly since then, because we now have additional things to do, additional burdens and additional issues. So I suppose it's an opportunity really to reset some of that in a post-COVID context and to refocus and recognise that maybe we now need to prioritise and invest in a slightly different way. So that reflection has meant that there have been some changes across the board, and to some extent as well, that has also been informed by our recovery priorities that have been identified and agreed by Cabinet, and of course the work of the cross-party recovery panel that have also made a series of recommendations for things that they would want us to consider. So some of those issues will of course be incorporated immediately into this plan, but you'll also recognise that some of those recommendations will also feed into the longer term planning for next year's corporate plan, depending on the timescales. So in terms of the report itself, of course, there's still some similarities, great similarities with the original corporate plan. The three main wellbeing objectives remain the same, and of course they remain valid, and our contribution to achieving the 7 national wellbeing goals in the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act are also, of course, still valid. So it's Appendix A that sets out the main changes and revisits some of the targets as I've described. And you'll recognise, if I give an example, why this is necessary. So in the original plan, there were, for example, quite ambitious targets around footfall in our town centres. During lockdown, obviously footfall was very low, if non-existent, for a number of months. So some of the original targets and original part of the plan are no longer as relevant. I would also make the point, and I think I said it in passing, that whatever we change the corporate plan, it's usually also reflected in some sort of review and resetting of the MTFS as well, to ensure that we can deliver on the priorities that we agree. So if I take you through the main changes in Appendix A, first of all, in terms of the supporting a successful economy, in the learner outcomes section, you'll recognise there's some changes around our new focus on having to deliver blended and hybrid learning and the development of safe school environments. Again, wasn't obviously something on our radar back in February, but now an incredibly important part of what we do. In economic growth and prosperity, you will note the changes which reflect the increased focus on increased infrastructure support for business to overcome the pandemic, and also increased support for our visitor economy and enhanced support, recognising some of the challenges that need to be overcome and the challenges of operating in the difficulties in the current environment. In terms of resilient communities, we've picked up the fact that that working in partnership and in collaboration, particularly with town and community councils, but also with other organisations, is going to be a really important part of what we do in terms of creating long-term sustainable solutions and managing and maintaining facilities and services moving forward. We've also made some subtle changes where previously we simply talked about participation in things like leisure and culture, but clearly there's a rebuilding job to be done there as people need to regain confidence in using those facilities on a regular basis as they gradually reopen. And finally, in smarter use resources, as you would expect, we are hoping to embrace digital transformation and service remodelling. Some of the changes that have been made over the last 6 months, I've said previously, we'd want to endure and keep and sustain. And some interesting opportunities for new ways of working and for service delivery that have emerged as part of that. And moving forward, I think we can expect some of this to crystallise more fully, really, in terms of what does that mean for agile working? What does it mean for our targets? Is indeed working from home something that we should be celebrating and trying to push, or is it just a consequence of where we now are? So that's an evolving issue. So it doesn't actually have a target as yet, but you recognise that that's an important part of what we're doing. So really, in conclusion to all of that, I hope that the changes to the plan are sensible changes and reflect the significant and unique circumstances that we've experienced since the lockdown in March, and therefore delivers for us a fit for purpose and realistic corporate plan. But I said, Mr. Mayor, I'd return to the fact that this report was considered by Cabinet yesterday. And one of the challenges sometimes of having Cabinet and Council on consecutive days is, of course, the pack that in front of you doesn't contain some of the changes that were approved by Cabinet yesterday. So what I would like to do just quickly is run through some of those main changes, because what we'd like Council to do is actually endorse the version that has been approved by Cabinet rather than the version of the pack. So if I just run through quickly those main changes, just for ease of reference, on page 40, Appendix A, in Wellbeing Objective 1, I think the view yesterday was there needed to be some added narrative regarding vacant premises and actually reflecting the ongoing work the council's already investing in things like free car parking and rental holidays for where we're the landlord. So explaining some of the measures that are already in place. And additionally, I think there needs to be a change in the narrative around startup businesses. Clearly the target may not be the same, and indeed the target may not be appropriate, but it wasn't the intention to give the impression in the plan that we were only dealing with ensuring the resilience of existing businesses, though of course that is now a focus and a really important one. We will also continue to work and try and encourage and promote startup businesses as well. So that narrative will also be changed to reflect that. Then on page 42, again with Wellbeing Objective 2, this is quite a simple change, really, where the new measure talks about working with town and community councils and community groups. We think we need to add into that the third sector more generally, which I think is an important and sensible change, and as I say, a relatively simple one. On page 43 in the section on homelessness, again, the feeling yesterday was that there needed to be additional narrative and potentially a target reflecting our working with rough sleepers and the additional Welsh Government funding that we've received for that purpose. I don't have the specific detail of that yet, but I think that's a valid suggestion and one that we can add in terms of the revision. And a couple of final ones. There's an additional measure that Cabinet wanted to include again in this section on Wellbeing Objective 2, but in the Better Health and Wellbeing section, where I think this is really important, but post-COVID, the development of a strategy and supporting action plan to support mental health for both adults and children is something that we should include, and something indeed that we're already working on, but should be there as a specific measure that we'll be monitored on. So that will also be added. And then finally, and this was just an oversight because it should have been in the first place, on page 68 in terms of Wellbeing Objective 3, there's a missing element that should have included our work with apprenticeships and recognising the increased focus and indeed increased number of apprentices that the council intends employing during the course of this year. So in brief, they are the changes that were endorsed by Cabinet yesterday. I hope they're regarded as both straightforward and sensible changes. And so, Mr Mayor, to take you to the recommendations, it's the report with those changes that we're seeking council to endorse. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Hugh, do you want to add to that, or before I ask for a mover and a seconder, or are you going to move the report?
I just wanted to move the report. I wholeheartedly support the inclusion of the targets on apprenticeships. That's something that I know is close to members' hearts. I wholeheartedly support the inclusion of a priority around making sure that those rough sleepers who are sleeping on the streets of Bridgend until this pandemic stay off the streets through our work around securing the move-on accommodation. And thirdly, I know this is a priority for all members too, is developing a strategy around how we support mental health for adults and for children and young people, because for lots of people this pandemic has really pushed them to the limit. We had problems before. There's lots of initiatives going on, but we want to work with health and the third sector on developing a strategy so we can make those improvements and support more people and provide better support to those people who are in need. Thank you.
Second. Thank you very much, Gary. I didn't even get a chance to ask for that then. Questions then. I have Councillor Matthew Voisey, please.
Thank you again. I will make a very quick statement before the question that I do commend the report because it is taking current circumstances into account and being flexible. So I do appreciate that. It's really in relation to item 8 about the financial impact. And it says there's no financial impact, but clearly there is going to be financial impacts. And also in changes in the way we work, will that have an impact on the number of people we employ as a council? So if that could be my question, please.
If I may, Mr Mayor.
Of course you may, Mark.
I'll answer that, and of course Deb may wish to come in. I think there are two parts to the question really. In terms of financial impact, well yes, there may be, and I've talked previously, certainly in BREP, about we're facing great uncertainty because we don't as yet know wholly what will be funded moving forward by Welsh Government, even though actually to this stage, to this point, most of our requests have been. But also a recognition that I think I mentioned in passing that we do have some new pressures, new burdens. So we weren't previously having to, for example, spend money on things like test and trace, or increased enforcement, or indeed increased education officers, increased advice around COVID. Now, some of that may be incorporated by existing staff, but it may be moving forward that we also have to adapt and change, and people's roles and indeed new roles may emerge to respond to that. In terms of that, therefore, we still have the ability at the moment to claim COVID costs to Welsh Government, and that's ongoing. We have also, as a precautionary issue, as you will know, I think, Councillor Boise, got two things within the Council. We have an earmark reserve to cover existing COVID expenses, which is just a prudent way of ensuring that we have money to cover things that may emerge. And then we actually created a specific COVID fund, recognising that there may be some things that we need to invest in a way, again, that we wouldn't have envisaged previously. So to give you an example of that from the COVID fund, you will know that we've had free car parking and car parking offers ongoing for a period of time. That is paid for from the COVID fund. So I think I'm confident that the one-off costs can be covered because we've made the financial measures to ensure that. As things stand, we are finding that government is being supportive of our measures, but I would repeat that there are some uncertainties moving forward, particularly where either a loss of income or an increased expenditure is on a more permanent basis, and I think that's the concern. And in terms of your second element about staff, I suppose I would see it more at the moment about staff working differently and in alternative ways, rather than there being less of them. I think we recognise already that there are some advantages from working from home, but there are also some disadvantages. And I think, I envisage probably a hybrid model moving forward based on current government advice, current circumstances. But I don't think it's about reducing staff. If anything, we have new burdens at the moment and actually potentially increased demand for some of our services because there's been suppressed demand during the pandemic and during lockdown. So that's not what I envisage currently, but I do envisage that we will have to do things differently, and particularly things, as I mentioned in presenting the report, things like digital solutions and more agile working will become an increasingly important part of what we do.
Thank you, Mark. Councillor Altaf Hussain, please.
Thank you very much. It is with regards to our leader, he has said about the mental health. What I would suggest is also that it should include the elderly population who are having the brunt of COVID-19. They do suffer with post-stress COVID syndrome. In addition, they do suffer from depression, isolation, loneliness, and alcohol dependence. So we should not forget them. They should be included. They are bearing the brunt of COVID-19. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor
Mr. Mayor, do you want me to respond to that? Absolutely, Councillor Hussain, I couldn't agree more. And just to be clear, I did say that it would be a strategy for children, young people and all adults. And you're right, it needs to be an encompassing strategy that looks at the mental health pressures faced by all our communities, because anyone can face mental health problems, can't they? The estimate is 1 in 4 the population will experience serious mental health problems during their lifetime, and we need to make sure that there's universal support there and the specialist services as well as intermediate services also. So thank you for flagging that up, and that's the ambition that I have for the strategy and delivering that jointly with the third sector and with the health sector as well.
Thank you, Leader. And of course, it's called a corporate plan because it covers all of our activities. So saying that we need to highlight certain ones, we have to make sure that we're covering all of them. I don't have any other questions in relation to that. Thank you, Altaf. So we've had a mover and a seconder. Are we all in favour? And I'll take a silence as agreement.
Yes.
Okay, before we could move on to the next agenda, I have had a text, believe it or not, from Kelly Byrne in relation to her presentation earlier. And apparently it has been released to the Conservative press that the Cardiff Capital Region support the M4 and blame Welsh Government. And as you know, she claimed that she is but a mere officer and let Frank give his view as an independent business leader. And as many of you within the chamber know, independent comes with the title of being independent. So it has nothing to do with the Cardiff Capital Region. So I want to set right in minutes right now that Kelly Byrne, as the director of the City deal, did not endorse the criticism of Welsh Government and the cancelling of the M4 at Newport and the Brynglas tunnels. So thank you to whoever misrepresented her statement to the Conservative press while we are still in the middle of our meeting. So yes, it's Frank is an independent and is not the CCR, and he's entitled to his own view, and the Cardiff Capital Region is the regional cabinet, and I hope that puts a full stop in relation to that statement. And I would appreciate whichever one of our Conservative members spoke to the press correct their statement so that it is factual. Thank you, Gary. I note you have to leave. Fantastic. See you again very soon. We will move on to the next agenda item now, agenda item 9, and again back to Mark for a report in relation to the Bridgend Local Development Plan revised delivery agreement. Mark, are you taking this?
No, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to pass this over to Jonathan Parsons and Gareth Denning from our planning department, if that's okay for you.
It is, of course. Welcome both.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For the purpose of the recording, my name is Gareth Denning and I'm the Strategic Planning Policy Team Leader. The purpose of this report is to advise members of the necessity to revise the Local Development Plan Delivery Agreement and to seek approval to make amendments to the timetable and community involvement scheme in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. The Development Control Committee has agreed the recommendations in this report and referred them to Council for approval. The preparation of a local development plan is a statutory requirement for each local authority in Wales and will set out the Council's land use strategy for the period 2018 to 2033. And the first stage of that process required the Council to prepare a delivery agreement for approval by Welsh Government, which was achieved in June 2018. The delivery agreement is a mandatory requirement of the LDP process and effectively forms a contract between the Council and the Welsh Government. It comprises two key elements: the timetable, which sets out how the Council will manage the programme for preparing the LDP. It identifies the key stages of the process and a timescale for when each stage will be completed. And the community involvement scheme, which sets out who, when and how the Council will consult and engage with various stakeholders during the production of the LDP. Since June 2018, the Council has made considerable progress on the preparation of the LDP, which is identified in the bullet points in paragraph 3.4 of this report. Progress towards the next key stage, consultation on the deposit plan, which was originally scheduled for July and August of this year, has been delayed due to the impact of the pandemic. And this is the subject of the necessary changes to the delivery agreement, which I'll go on to explain. So the Council received a letter from the Welsh Government on the 7th of July 2020, advising it to undertake an assessment of the technical evidence base underpinning the replacement LDP in terms of its sensitivity to the consequences of the pandemic. Officers have completed this task and the findings are attached at Appendix 1 for noting. Welsh Government also advised that delivery agreements and community involvement schemes should be adjusted to account for any delays, new patterns of working, and alternative methods of stakeholder engagement brought about by the need to maintain social distancing. So the proposed revised delivery agreement is attached to Appendix 2. This highlights the delays to LDP preparation as a result of the pandemic, which are included in the bullet points of paragraph 4.2 of this report. The first two bullet points have caused the biggest time delay, namely the inability of site promoters to carry out site-specific technical work to support their candidate site submissions,
and the closure of schools and workplaces, preventing the assessment of accurate traffic impact of development proposals until the last week or two. The proposed revisions to the timetable are illustrated in paragraph 4.3, and I would draw members' attention to stage 4, which now indicates that the deposit plan will be subject to consultation between January and March 2021. An allowance has also been made to extend the statutory consultation period of 6 weeks to 8 weeks to provide more time for people to provide their views whilst accounting for any further restrictions imposed. The final adoption of the LDP is likely to be delayed by up to 6 months as a result, though the dates relating to the stages following submission of the plan to Welsh Government are indicative at this stage, as they're dependent on third-party involvement. The community involvement scheme has been amended to account for the potential use of alternative methods of stakeholder engagement in order to maintain the social distancing measures that are likely to be required for the foreseeable future. These are bulleted at paragraph 4.5 and include continued engagement with members, community councils and other key stakeholders through virtual meetings such as this, greater use of social media and web-based technology, one-to-one telephone conversations to engage members of the community without internet access, potential use of larger venues for public exhibitions and meetings to accommodate social distancing measures, pre-booked appointment-based drop-in sessions so that we can manage the number of stakeholders present at any given time and to help manage officer time, and the potential use of internal and external agencies to assist with community meetings and engagement. An example of that is during the preferred strategy stage of the plan preparation, we enlisted the use of planning aid. So the recommendation is at paragraph 9, and I'm willing to answer any questions that members may have, either now or in the days and weeks to come. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You're muted, Stuart.
Sorry, can I have a mover and a seconder, please?
I'll move that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Second.
Good. Okay, do I have any questions in relation to the report? No. I have nobody indicating that they would like to speak in relation to that matter, so are we all in favour?
Yes.
I'll take silence as an agreement.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, the next agenda item then is agenda item 10, which is the report of the Chief Officer Legal, HR and Regulatory Services, and this is an information report for noting. So Kelly, would you like to take this report?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's just a very
Sorry, Kelly, can I just stop you there? Councillor Gifford has intimated a point of order. Could you tell me what point of standing orders has been breached, Tom, so that I can address whether there is a point of order? Councillor Gifford, what point has been broken or breached that you consider that there is a point of order? Are you there? You've typed.
Maybe his microphone is not on.
Can you hear me?
Oh.
I can now. What point of order has been breached?
I was hoping you could repeat what you said earlier and allow me the right.
No, can I just stop you there, Tom? You've said there is a point of order. What is the point of order?
I presume that when a member, or the mayor in this instance, mentions another group or another member, that they then have the right of reply on that.
No, I made a statement. What is the point of order? What breach? What standing order?
Could I ask Kelly?
No, you address me, Tom, not the legal officer.
That, you know.
Can somebody move? If he continues to ignore the fact that I'm the chair in this meeting, I will have your microphone muted.
And I've also
address me and allow me to speak.
I have done, and
I will ask. Let me, and I will ask the question. Kelly, I made a statement in relation to a text that I had received. We have had a question raised that there is a point of order. Is there a point of order that has been breached that Tom Gifford has the right, or Councillor Gifford has the right to speak on?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can't see that Councillor Gifford has identified a particular point of order. He hasn't referenced any article of the Constitution that he feels has been breached. Obviously, if he does, then I can look at that further. In terms of you making the statement, that was in relation to a previous item that was considered and was a matter of conduct for the members. I felt you were passing that message on.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. Councillor Gifford, have you identified a breach in the Constitution that you would like to raise a point of order on?
Thanks. I haven't got the Constitution in front of me, or however, on the basis that you did specifically reference the Conservative group, as the leader of the Conservative group, I feel it would be proper of you to invite me for a right of reply.
Were you not listening at that particular point when the statement was made?
I didn't catch it, no.
Right,
But
okay.
I would appreciate it if you would repeat
Well,
it.
I will allow you to a right to reply in relation to it. So what is your reply in relation to the statement?
I would hope that any assertion made about any member or any group in this council would be backed up with a degree of evidence or any particular a statement, or, like I say, to back that up. At the moment, it just seems like a baseless accusation targeted at a party political group that you don't like. So unless you're able to back that up, I would request that you withdraw the assertion.
I have received a text from the director of the City Deal who had identified that somebody had spoken to the Conservative press about the City Deal. So there's nothing baseless. I have received a text as the chair of this meeting.
Did it say Conservative group or did it say Conservative press? Because they're two different things. There are 8 Conservative members.
Actually, it says Tory press. It is the wording. So
it's still not clear that one of the 8 Conservative councillors that are here today are behind that. So I don't know that I would have said that if I was in your position.
You'll have to excuse me, Councillor Gifford, but I hardly think that a Labour member is going to report something to the Tory press in relation to what has been said. So I think you need to consider your words a little bit more carefully, to be honest, because why would anybody other than a Conservative speak to the Tory press?
And how do you define the Tory press?
Well, this is
Conservative
what
aligned
I've
newspaper?
received.
Because anybody can contact them.
Well, I've received a text that says that what was the Conservative councillor called who asked about M4? Okay, he's now, that was obviously Councillor Voisey that asked the question. I don't know, and I'm not saying that it was Councillor Voisey that has contacted anybody. But he's apparently told Tory press that Cardiff Capital Region support M4 and blame Welsh Government. As you know, I made a comment about being but an officer and let Frank give his view as an independent business leader. I even tried to change focus to broader levelling up. And then she said that Frank is independent and is not a Cardiff Capital Region and is entitled to his own view. Cardiff Capital Region is regional cabinet. So what I did, which I felt was right, that considering that had gone out, I wanted it put into the minutes that the officer, the director in charge of the Cardiff Capital Region City Deal, did not criticise Welsh Government in relation to the M4 decision, that it was an independent person that had made that comment. Do you have an objection to that comment?
I don't have an objection to his comment, because that is a text that you have received. I have an objection to your comment. However, like, I can see that other councillors want to come in, so I'm very happy to give way to those other councillors.
Before I bring anybody else in, you have an objection to my comment. What comment do you have an objection to?
Nowhere in anything that you said was there an assertion that any Conservative councillor was behind any kind of leak or any kind of interaction with any kind of press.
Well, it's not really a leak, is it? Because this isn't private. This is a public meeting.
Right. So you've got no evidence of any interaction between any Conservative councillor and any member of press whatsoever. But yet here we are, you making that assertion. So I do have an objection to it, and I do take issue with it.
Okay. Well, that is noted. But at the end of the day, I will not be
withdrawing. I hope in the same way that will be.
I will not be withdrawing. Councillor Walters, would you like to speak?
Yes, I would, please, Mr. Mayor, and thank you very much for bringing me in. I'd also like to express my dissatisfaction, particularly with your comment then directly accusing Councillor Voisey during that exchange with Councillor Tom Gifford. As you will also see in the record of typing, Councillor Voisey
I'm going to stop you there, Lynn.
So I'm sorry, Councillor Baldwin. No. I believe that your conduct is unbecoming.
I will stop you there, Councillor Walters. I did not accuse Councillor Voisey of anything. I said that he asked the question. I did not accuse him.
In the text, you then went on to say that Councillor Voisey, in your comments to Councillor Tom Gifford just then, you did say that.
Councillor Walters, Mr. Mayor, can I intervene for a moment? We have a motion to move progress, and that motion's also been seconded. So, Mr. Mayor, you're going to have to deal with that motion now to move progress on this matter.
Okay.
The motion was put by Councillor Watts and it's been seconded by Councillor Patel.
Okay, well, if that motion has been moved and seconded, then we will move progress and there will be no further discussion on that. So we will move. You'd like to go to a vote in relation to move progress, Councillor Voisey?
I do think we're trying to, make accusations about members of the Conservative group. It could quite easily have been a member of the public that supported the M4 Relief Road.
Can I just stop you there? There are no members of the public in this meeting, are there? This meeting is not publicly broadcast. This meeting is recorded and then placed onto the website after the meeting is finished. So there are no members of the public watching this meeting. It is, if somebody has contacted the Tory press, then as I've received in a text, then it is somebody from within this chamber.
Mr. Mayor, can I just say something? I don't want to intervene, but we've had legal advice from Kelly Watson to say to move on. Now, if there's an argument after, let it be, but let's move on with business of the council.
Thank you, Councillor Granville. Councillor Voisey has asked for a vote on that.
I just want to make it clear, I have not spoken to anybody outside of this meeting during the meeting, and I want to make it clear that I have not been in touch with the press.
And Councillor Voisey, I have not indicated that you have spoken to anybody either. Despite what has been said, I have not claimed you have spoken to anybody. But Jane, you have asked for a point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I understand that a motion has been moved, it's been seconded, and we are still having statements. Could we have the vote, please?
Okay. Kelly, what is the position in relation to voting on whether we move progress on this? Because as far as I'm concerned, progress is being moved, but Councillor Voisey has asked for a vote on it, but that vote hasn't been seconded.
Okay, is there a seconder to Councillor Voisey's request for a vote? Okay, so we've Councillor Walters has seconded that, so now we're going to move to a vote. You're voting on whether we move progress on this matter or whether we continue debate in this matter. So what I'm going to need to ask is that nobody types anything in the chat box other than move on or continue debate. So if you want to move on to the next item, please type move on. If you want to continue the debate, please type continue debate. This is going to take some time because obviously they've then got to be counted up. Okay, I think people have finished typing now. Are people content that we move on, or would you like us to actually count them individually? Mr. Mayor?
Move on.
As far as I can see, Kelly, the majority are saying move on.
That's my view, without counting them one by one. I think that's quite clear.
Yes, that's my view as well. As the mover of the motion, that's my view as well.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, you can move the matter on.
Well, we'll move the matter on then.
Obviously, they will be counted, and the correct numbers will be included in the minute.
Can we have the names of those that wish to continue the debate and those that wish to move on identified, please?
We didn't call for a recorded vote, Councillor, but you can see the names on the sidebar there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we will move on to item 10 then, which is your report, Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I said, it's just a quick information report for noting, and it's just to inform members of information reports that have been published since your last meeting. At 4.1, you can see there have been two such reports. One was in relation to urgent delegated decisions, and the other was the final statements of accounts for 2019 to 2020. They are both appended to your pack, and unless you've got any questions, I just ask you to note that they have been published. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Do I have a mover and a seconder, please?
Move, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
And is there any questions? And all in favour? Right, okay.
Yes.
We'll move on to agenda item number 11 then, and that is to receive the questions for the executives from Councillor Altaf Hussain to the Cabinet Member of Social Services and Early Help. So, Councillor Hussain, you've received your written response. Do you have a supplementary question?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I have a supplementary question.
May we have it?
Okay. Many thanks to Councillor White for his response, and I am really grateful. We talked earlier when the leader was speaking about the mental health. We know that this elderly population was missing from the response from Councillor White. But my question is that in his report, Councillor White mentioned about PERMA. I am curious to know more about PERMA well-being profiling tool, which they are going to pilot this year across 10 Bridgend schools. Could you please let the council know more about it? Thank you very much, Mayor.
Thank you, Altaf. Councillor Phil White, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Hussain. As always, I know your concerns about residents of Bridgend are at the heart of yourself.
Thank you.
Yes, I thought it was a very comprehensive response, and I thank you for the question. I think that if you wanted to know more about that, then I would like to bring in our officers, which would be give you the further explanation on PERMA. Whether or not we've got the time to do that now, or you would be happy to receive that, communicate via email. I would ask Laura, and I would ask perhaps our Director of Education, Lindsay, if we could compile something and get that back to you more in a briefing sense, or more in a briefing content, if you were happy with that, Councillor.
I would be grateful, but would suggest that let every council know about it. Thank you.
And as you know, I always make sure I try to make sure that everybody, which is a member of this council, gets informed, especially when it comes to anything to do with social services, Councillor Hussain. And I will do that. And I'm sure Laura and Lindsay will work together from the directorates on that to get that back to you. Thank you, Councillor Hussain.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Altaf. I do have two additional questions. Councillor John Spanswick first, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I ask what are the future plans for working with the third sector in respect of preventative measures that we've talked about, and how does that dovetail with the Regional Partnership Board?
Thank you, John. Phil, do you want to take that, or?
again, can I thank Councillor Spanswick for that, and I can actually tell you that we are working very closely with our partners through the Regional Partnership Board, but as within Bridgend as well. But I'm sure Jackie and Laura would also like to comment on that, if they would, please.
Yeah, hi, it's Laura here. Jackie's not in the meeting today, but yeah, I can confirm, Councillor Spanswick, that we've, as you know, and particularly over recent months, we've been working very closely with the third sector. They are represented on the RPB, and we will continue to do that as well in terms of the mental health agenda for children, young people and all adults affected by mental health issues and by the recent pandemic, and that is a priority for the region as well, and it is something we are looking at in kind of the subgroups for adults and children in the region as well.
Thank you,
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, next question then, Councillor Jane Gebby, please.
Thank you, Chair. Is there any way that we think our response could be improved if there is a local lockdown? I mean, Caerphilly was locked down at the weekend, and this afternoon we've heard that Rhondda Cynon Taf has been locked down. So it's a local lockdown, but is there anything that we would do differently if we had to do a local lockdown in Bridgend, please?
Phil.
I'm sorry, yeah, Councillor Gebby, I think that's right. The current situation with COVID is that we seem to be having to respond on a daily basis. And again, I think that we touched on that this morning, Laura, didn't we? And again, if I could ask Laura if she could come in and just respond of how the Directorate would respond if needed to be, if we had to go into a lockdown position.
Yeah, I suppose what I would say, Councillor Gebby, is that we feel we are continuing to sort of, operate in, I suppose, a semi-lockdown position anyway at the moment, aren't we? Because we are, children, young people and adults are still, subject to the restrictions that are in place in terms of how they live in their lives, and that is impacting on them. And we continue to support citizens to deal with those issues as well. And I think we've previously reported in various forums about the way we're delivering services differently, the way we're working with citizens differently, and as Councillor White has just indicated, really, we are reviewing that every day. And speaking from the children's social care perspective, we have a service delivery plan that is continually subject to review, and that is based on sort of the local issues, but also the guidance that we have from Welsh Government that is itself reviewed as well, approximately every 4 to 6 weeks. So we're continually reviewing how we do things, really. And, we will also, if we do go into a stricter lockdown, as you've indicated, we know could happen, then we would then revisit things like some of the operational forums that we had across the region to look at safeguarding implications and any other specialist services or responses that would need to be put in place in that context. So we would resume those tighter, I suppose, oversight mechanisms as well.
Mr. Mayor, can I just thank Laura for that? But can I just mention one thing, Mr. Mayor, before I ask Laura to come in?
Of course.
Obviously, if we ever move to that position, we are already currently experiencing some of the pressures we're having on our staff with regards to what's happening in the schools and the quarantines that's happening. And, when it comes to some of our staff, maybe not being able to turn up for work or do their duties as a result of the quarantine, we are finding already that's starting to impact on the service. So a lockdown will be a much more difficult situation for us all, I think, at Bridgend. And I guess we'll pick on the experiences of what's happening in Caerphilly and RCT to forward that.
Thank you, Phil. No other questions in relation to that. So we move on to agenda.
Mr. Mayor, if I could, just a minute.
Sorry.
Thank you very much, Councillor White. I think for me, I'd like to know, is there anything that as councillors could do differently if we do go into a local lockdown? I mean, what is it that we can do to support our communities more?
Councillor Gebby, look, again, thank you for that. I think we touched on that with regards to our reports yesterday, Cabinet, and our COVID recovery plan for the authority. And I would like to think that every local member, where they could, if they could play their part in terms of what they can do out in the community, we would be more than grateful.
Okay. Jane, I hope that's answered your question. If there's anything else, can I ask you to put it in an email to Councillor Philip White, and I'm sure he will get back to you as soon as possible. We move on to agenda item 12, which is urgent items, and I have no urgent items, and therefore at 11 minutes past